begin with a roll call, please.
Commissioner Hesner?
Here.
Commissioner Heidner?
Here.
Commissioner Mulchrone?
Here.
Commissioner Baloo?
Present.
Commissioner Cotton?
Here.
Commissioner Gorig? Chairman Morris?
Here.
You have it.
This evening, the first matter on our agenda is the continued case number 18-08, a petition filed on behalf of the Cook Memorial Library District to A, amend the existing special use permit to allow for an expansion of the Aspen Drive Library PUD for the construction of additional parking spaces and related improvements. B, approve the final site and landscape plans and building elevations. And C, approve the final plat of easement for this property. This property, as we probably know, is commonly known as the Cook Memorial Library, PUD. It is located at 701 Aspen Drive, Vernon Hills, Illinois. Who's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner this evening?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is David Archer. I'm the Director of the Cook Memorial Public Library District. With me tonight are architects Dan Port and Alex Krug of Product Architecture and Design.
Okay. Is anybody else going to either speak or testify on behalf?
Certainly these two individuals, and I may very well may.
Okay.
also
We'd ask,
swear solemnly.
okay, then we'd ask you to raise your right hand. Let you get situated. And we ask that you swear or affirm that this testimony you're about to give before this commission of the Village of Vernon Hills shall be the truth.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. All right. The primary rule we have is that you need to speak either from the standard microphones or from one of the handhelds, because this is going out, obviously, to millions by TV, and they need to be able to hear everything. Okay? So with that, you are on.
So we're here tonight to, as you mentioned, for three separate items. One is to, for the board's consideration of the special use permit. We have operated at the Aspen Library since 2010 when we were originally granted that. The changes you see in front of you and that will be presented tonight really involve just an expansion of our existing operations at Aspen Drive. It's been a very successful building since opening. I think the community has responded exceptionally well, and for those of you who were there on opening day back on July 7th of 2010, you may have realized that the building was too small then. So over the course of the past several years, the Board of Trustees have worked with administrative staff to identify a way to expand the building to best meet the needs of the community. And the expansion tonight that you'll be seeing focuses on a 15,000 square foot expansion, half of which would be open to the public right away as a dedicated children's area. The other half would be an unfinished basement for future development. The existing building will also see some enhancements as well, especially to address some of the issues that we have regarding space, especially for our after-school kids who visit the library. We also have enhancements for those adults who wish to have a quieter space, and we also have a need for a dedicated high school area as well. So there'll be more seating throughout, more collection space, and we're really excited to answer any questions tonight regarding this project. So that's a very broad overview of the project that you have here in front of you.
Would you gentlemen like to add anything?
As part of the design too, what we've done with the exterior of the building is really matched what's there on site. We're using glass curtain wall, which is predominant within the existing building. We're matching the existing masonry entirely. The existing roof has a metal soffit and wood fascia on the underside. Wood soffit and metal fascia that we're matching. All heights are the same. So really what we've tried to do is create an expansion in the library that fits the exact aesthetic that is on site today. We're not interested in sort of creating something that is, or building upon with the success that's already there.
Okay. Any questions for anyone on the commission?
Are you the original architect as
We
well?
are not.
Why a basement? You know, elevators and fire stairs are extremely expensive, so why go down and why not just use a slab and go out?
One of the things that we learned, our board learned from the initial construction is that we wish we had done a basement, and the village strongly asked us at that time back in 2010 to add one. And I think had we built one, that we would have far more options for storage and for programming. Maybe not even in need of an expansion at this point, but The need for us to plan for the future is great. We have the money now, so we figured we should add that basement now to allow the potential for future boards to allocate money to finish that space off and either use it as staff space so that we can open up additional space on the main level or move some public spaces down into that basement. So it certainly did add cost, but really from day one, it was clear that the board intended to go for it with a basement. And I'm not sure I answered your question, so.
What are you gonna be doing in the basement?
We are going to be using it strictly for storage. There will be shelves down there to accommodate our overflow collections. Our Friends of the Library, which is our charitable arm is separate from the library, will also have some space down there to store their materials for the annual book sale. But other than those two areas, it will not be used for anything related to, that would require any occupancy.
And I had another question. You know, you're creating you're creating a new large open space, and at the same time, segmenting your current open space. Why not just create those new functions in the new addition? Why, you know, kind of destroy the existing large space that you have and create a new one? Why not just take those small spaces and put them in the addition?
One of the things that we wanted to do was make this, the primary, I'm not going to say certainly the primary driver of this project has been Children's Services, but it's been a large component of it. And we felt that the Children's Services, to build something from the ground up, would be extremely valuable for this project. There are certain things that we can't do right now in our existing building with Children's Services just because of the open nature of the building. By moving it into the new addition, it's an area exclusively for kids. There aren't issues with the kids wandering away from this area. There are things that we can do, such as built-in play areas in which they can interact with their parents. And so we felt that an area that was dedicated for kids was the best option, especially that that's tucked away from the main area of the library. It keeps that noise sort of sheltered into that northeast corner of the library. So the areas that you talked about in the existing building that might be carved up a little bit, I think you're probably referring to the quiet study area, which is in the southeast corner of the building. That's a quiet study area that right now is relegated to a small room on the west side of the building. With the new space, that has 180 degrees of space, or of views looking out to the east and to the south. And that's a much enlarged space that I think our customers really will enjoy. One of the things that we learned from our strategic planning was in a survey is that patrons did not have enough, at Aspen Drive, enough quiet space, given the active students that are there after school especially. And so having this quiet space in the existing area was an important thing as well. But I think to your point, the overriding factor was that we wanted to have something special and have that addition devoted to the kids.
Did you consider going up instead of down?
We did, and the building was not constructed to accommodate a second floor, not without considerable expense. I think, Dan, maybe.
Well, no, I mean on the addition.
We did, and that was an additional $600,000, which the board chose not to undertake.
What if you didn't do the basement, you just did two stories?
You know, like I said, the basement was never something that our board they always considered that something that they would have from the start. It was really never an issue.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, one of the primary goals for this facility was there was a lack of space overall. It was just too small for the activities that went on. Specifically, you know, at certain times of the day, the place is just filled with people. How did you come up with 7,500 square feet as being an ideal addition size? Because at first glance, it really looks like it's inadequate. You know, 7,500 square feet, that barely accommodates, you know, half the teens that are coming in there at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you know, loaded up on coffees, running around. So how did you come up with 7,500 square feet?
Frankly, early in the process, Scott, we worked with architects and our financial advisors to determine what kind of space could we get for the money that we had. And our board always knew that we weren't going to get the type of building that we truly needed for the amount of money that the board was able to spend. So 7.5, the figure for 7,500 square feet was the amount that we ultimately decided upon, given that we did need to have an area for storage and for future expansion as well. I will add that the 7,500 square foot footprint for the children's area is as big as the children's area at our Cook Park location in Libertyville, which has proven to be an adequate size. So to answer your question, will it be as big as I think some people would want it to be? Perhaps not, but I think that especially relegating the children's to the specific area, by using Cook Park as an example, we believe it's an adequate space.
Have you thought about programming for the basement, future programming?
Yes, yes. We have thought about putting our meeting room down in the basement and then making the meeting room a public space on the main level.
Because it seems like if you hadn't thought about programming for the basement, that'd be a big mistake at this juncture, because you're developing the space. But as far as the board's direction, was the board's direction to keep it undeveloped at this time in the lower level, or was that, how did that come about?
It was a cost issue. I think ultimately, the board knew that a basement was desired, that they desired it, and that at this point, fully building that out was not going to be within the constraints of the budget.
So what's the board's target date on starting to develop that area downstairs?
They don't have a target date. That is for future use.
Just for future use?
Correct.
In this site, it seems like, this is really sited well. The addition is in the appropriate location, obviously for future growth of the library, if and when, maybe never, quite possibly at some point. You need more additional space, because Vernon Hills is not a stagnant community. It's a community that's growing, and it's a community that wants a lot of things. They're becoming more and more demanding as far as a community is concerned. And I'm disappointed with the 7,500 square feet, because it seems at this time that's already it's needed already. It's going to be filled already to the brim, and you're going to be needing that lower level space sooner than you may think. And when I'm looking at the architecture, when I'm looking at the addition, it seems to me that 7,000 square feet is just not enough. It's just not enough to begin with as a footprint for this structure. So I wish there was a board member here tonight so I could find out what their thinking was, because if the board is saying that, shoot, this is all that we can afford, from our taxpayers, for our taxpayers right now is 7,500 square feet, or maybe 15,000 square feet, or really more like 12,000 square feet or 11,000 square feet when you finally finish it all up. I'd be very interested to find out what their thought was, because I believe it's undershot in its goal of serving the community as a community library, because this community needs that library, and the functions within that library are becoming more and more diverse, and the demand on the library is becoming so great. So I think that 7,500 square feet as a footprint is a mistake.
Well, to your point, Scott, if the development of that lower level doesn't have a time frame, and that's not to say that it can't be expedited. If we find in the next few years that our budget enables us to build that out, that's something that I think our board would certainly be willing to entertain.
How do you put the public in a basement with no light and vent?
What I suspect would happen is that we would move all staff operations down there and turn, and the meeting room down to the basement, and then turn all those main level areas into public space.
It just seems really large to have a basement for just storage whenever we're in a digital age and everything is online, and I can't imagine currently you probably don't have anywhere near 7,500 square feet that you need for storage.
Well, most certainly not, and I'm not going to say that entire area is for storage. It's not. There's going to be some of it that's just going to be sitting empty.
It seems very wasteful when you could have 12,000 square feet above
Sure,
ground
I understand.
to service the community.
One of the things that we received guidance from the beginning was that back in 2010, I think the board was very remembered very well from the late 2000s that the village wanted to have a basement because they felt that the size of the existing building was too small. And in fact, they were right, it was too small, and we should have done that basement. So I think in the back of the minds of the trustees, they wanted to ensure that there was a basement in this building as well, to keep our options open.
Yeah, and the building being a little bit undersized to begin with in 2010, starting off undersized, and then all of a sudden, here we are in 2019, and we're adding 7,500 square feet onto an already undersized building. I just believe that is just further perpetuating the need for space. And it's kind of sad because you have a great opportunity here. This is the time. This is the time to do it. This is the time to get all the ducks in a row, to satisfy the needs of the community. And we know how demanding that we can be in this community and what we need and what we use. And it seems like this one is just, it's not reaching the goal that maybe you've wanted, you know, from the beginning. And that's why I really wish some library board members were here to address that kind of stuff, because they're the ones that counsel you. And the library board members are the ones that counsel you on making decisions. Sure. And you guys can't make the decisions without their grace, without them saying yes, no, maybe, you know, so. And architecturally, you know, it is contextual with the existing building. It's consistent with the existing building. But libraries have an inherent opportunity to instill and inspire culture and art within a community. And this is more of a vanilla box solution to an addition. I think there will be a lot of people within the community that will not know that this building has been expanded. They won't be able to visually tell that something's been done. I do not put that on the architect, because this architect most certainly has the ability to design awesome things. They have the talent, the drive, the ability to do all those things. But they're instructed by a board that is saying, no, we want something simple. We wanted just a three elevation addition onto a building that's contextual, that gets us the least expensive solution possibly, although you could probably even develop more space even with the detailing that you have on this building. You've spent a little bit of money on some of the detailing. You could get more space, and space being the paramount issue here, I would applaud you if you went even simpler and got more space for this, but you didn't. You were instructed to work with more of a contextual solution, probably from the board, and something that tied in, you know, that synthesized well with the existing structure. But it seems like it's undershot again. And it's undershot because there's not enough life in this addition. This addition needs to be more. It needs to have some art and architecture to it. It needs to represent 2019, not 2010. Libraries are noted for creating pavilion-style architecture based upon time. They are developed over time because libraries grow over time. They change over time. Pavilions are created over time. And so the architecture typically reflects something new, something different, maybe an architectural style by the architect, maybe something that is important to the community. In this case, it may be a nice addition, but it doesn't do that. It doesn't inspire. It doesn't bring forward things that are meaningful architecturally in an artistic manner. It does it nicely and contextually, and it fits, which is another way of reaching a solution. And I don't fault the architect on doing that because he's done it well. I feel that it's, again, the board that did not want something that was different or inspirational for the community. I feel the board undershot again on this. And they did not help the architect, instruct you to bring forward a solution that is dynamic enough for this community. It satisfies a need, it's too small, but it's just not enough at this point. And I see that. Another thing I'd like to discuss just briefly is, you've got 7,500 square feet. And the plan accommodates 7,500 square feet for parking.
Correct.
I believe that that lower level is programmed and ready to rip, and as soon as this thing is constructed, you're gonna need to develop that space down there. So some of that parking, I feel that parking for that lower level should be developed now. It should be developed now because it's gonna happen so quick.
And of course, that's not in our budget, though, but we do have plans, so in regards to that, the plan is to add that additional parking when that basement is programmed into the existing parking island, as well as to the area on the northeast part of the property.
Great, but it's gonna happen quick. It's gonna be a bang, bang. And the thing is, things don't happen that quick. You know, especially with the library board, it's gonna take another survey, it's gonna take another study, it's gonna take another cost evaluation. This board doesn't operate that quickly. This parking really needs to be accommodated with this project. And to reinforce some of that thinking, I know that there are surrounding needs in the region. Park District, new kindergarten, schools across the way. That Lot 2 was always designated by the village for parking or a communal need. And parking is that communal need. And I know that people, maybe even staff from the new kindergarten or staff from the Park District is going to use part of your parking during the day.
Correct. That's correct.
And they will overlap at times because things don't always happen like we think that they will. So underdeveloping parking on Lot 2 is really undershooting, again, what is really needed in this particular region. Parking is a big deal. Back to school night, all the stuff that goes on at the community center. Who knows, programs at the library, for goodness sakes, are so popular at night.
Which we would expect the lot to be fully available for something like that, considering that the kindergarten building would not be used during the evening, and we plan to coordinate with the kindergarten building, or with the kindergarten staff, to ensure that any evening events that would occur on their end don't conflict with any of ours. So there would be a coordination required, and we're certainly realize some of the challenges we have to ensure that there is adequate parking, but one of the things that we wanted to go is to ensure that there would be as much green space as possible as well. What we didn't want to see was this expanse of concrete all along Lot 2, and I think we can all agree that the green space is better than this mass of concrete as well. So.
Green space is great. Parking when you need it is better. When you need the parking, you need the parking. And I believe that the parking that would be required for space being developed for the library should be part of this project. Because not only the library needs it, but all the other groups need it too. And while you started the subject of green space, Yeah, there's big open space, but I think the landscaping is really undershot too. There's nothing public about this open space.
In Lot 2 or on the library lot, Scott?
And Lot 2
Lot
and on the library lot. There's landscaping around the base of the building, which is very nice. But there's no outdoor reading spaces, there's no benches, there's no public space for people outside of the library to do library-type things, library-oriented things. And I believe that in this case, it's so straightforward and open that it's missing something. It's like it's not finished. And I know that people from Victory Center would like to sit in a park-like setting in that green space rather than just on a lawn. And that's kind of what we've got here is a lawn. And I know that the library has always talked about outdoor reading spaces and you know, you've really thought that through, but it doesn't show up here. You know, is the budget so low that you can't create more space, you can't create great public green space, you can't develop enough parking for what is needed? It seems like this is being built in the hopes that it's going to work versus with the knowing that it's going to work. And I've got some serious concerns about those things.
Well, to your point about the green space, you know, modifying that area to make it more hospitable is certainly something we can do as a library and even with our partners, you know, at the village to enhance that walkway between the Victory Center and the library. You know, I don't think that necessarily has to be spelled out in this project. Obviously, there are opinions on this board, or on this commission, but that's certainly something that we can add to this project or even down the road as well. But I would admit that was not a priority in this project simply because we were focusing on a rather tight budget and addressing some of the priorities that the board had regarding this project. And most of those were addressing internal. That's correct, yes.
Because in a library, that's where the magic happens, inside.
Well, and I remember the discussion from the early parts of the planning is that we came up with a list of 30 things that we were most concerned about, or that staff was concerned about, and trustees were concerned about. And we eventually winnowed it down to a top 5. And that was space for after-school kids, more study rooms, more seating for everybody, and a little bit more space for collections. And those were the priorities. And you know, at some point, things like landscaped seating areas, while on the list, don't make the prioritized list.
But space was in all 4 of those things, or 5 of those things you just mentioned.
Correct.
Space. More space.
Correct.
Yeah.
You know, I wish that the design was more organic, and, you know, and I kind of second Mr. Hesner's, you know, eloquent thoughts on that. And I think you're backing yourself into a corner with how you've located the addition and then the allowing of the 2 easements. You know, you're pushing your building back because you're anticipating a road for the kindergarten. So you're damaging your own potential on your own site for another development. And you're also in the same point, if that actually does become a road, then you have a road 15 feet from your windows of your building. Sure. And then so the green space you're talking about is gone.
Well, the Greens, and first of all, we were being good partners, and and I'm not speaking, well, I will speak for our board. Our board decided, even though we didn't necessarily like to have the proposed access road on the easternmost part of our property, as good partners with the village and the school district, the board did say that they would support such a project, even if it meant coming close to the expanded building. And as far as but I never thought that green space to the east of the expansion was really the focal point. I see the green space to the south of the expansion, to the south of the expansion would be the area that would be the focal point for anyone sitting in the glassed-in areas of the new addition in the existing building.
Then why have so much glass in the east if you're not concerned about it?
On the expansion?
Yeah.
There's not as much glass on that, I mean, compared to the tall.
It's the
area.
longest side of your expansion, and it's all glass.
That's on the south. The east is brick piers, the brick fire stair, and then glass.
Can you pull up the elevation?
Yeah.
And show me?
I mean, it has glass in it, but it isn't the full glass elevation. I just want to make
It's
sure.
all glass, and there's a couple brick piers.
And then the
on the
fire,
addition, right here.
fire stair at the end, correct?
Yeah. So we're spending all that money on a facade that you're anticipating a road going by.
I'm not sure if it's important. This elevation here.
Correct. Right, it's all glass. A little bit. I just wish that the expansion of this was done more architecturally and thought given to where it's placed on the site and what the potential views would be out.
And I'm just curious, given that this potential access road could be in play, what would, in your opinion, what would have been a better choice for us to embark upon?
If you'd gone 2 stories and actually created some architectural piece that's attached, then you could have, garnered your views in certain areas, and then you could expand up and not pay all this money for a basement which you're unusing.
Or even a story in 2/3, with a mezzanine or some form of, something to enhance its, to give it presence, to give it its due. It's a very important addition onto this library. It's something that will be looked upon and used and hopefully loved for a long time. And right now, it's a single-story addition on the library looks very much like the library itself, it doesn't have its own character at all.
Is this being financed from current funds or is it being financed from a bond issue?
$2.4 million will be, a third of it will be for cash reserves. The remainder will be debt certificates over 20 years.
In terms of the addition that we're talking about, the 7,500 square foot of usable space today versus putting the basement aside, what does the library staff and board foresee its life, so to speak, until you're going to need more space? Is it a 1-year, 5-year, 10-year, 20-year plan?
It's a good question. I think once we determine, well, we have our budgets planned, given this added debt that we'll be having to pay off the debt. So that does impede our abilities to undertake some significant capital improvements such as this.
Understood.
That's not to say that we wouldn't be able to do any, because we have a comfortable budget and we're able to do enhancements. We were able to do enhancements at our Cook Park facility in Libertyville even while we were saving up for this one. Sure. So there are certainly, I can't say that the board has established a timeline for that. But I will say that there are some low-hanging fruit, such as the meeting room up on the main level, which could be relocated to the basement. The main level has a very sizable meeting room space that could be repurposed for public space, for seating, for additional study areas. That's always been something that we felt could be a relatively easy type of accommodation for future use. But as to the timeframe for that, the board hasn't indicated what that would be. Frankly, we're just getting through this process, or trying to get through this process until we get to then.
Fair enough. Let me try to ask it maybe a little bit differently.
Sure.
From the library, it's just really a library staff question. I sit on boards, and I know that we thought we knew, but we weren't there.
Yeah.
Okay, from a library staff perspective, for purposes of collection, your employees, as well as your programming, what is your estimate in terms of until you're going to outgrow this facility?
I understand. So the collections, our checkout rate has like a lot of libraries, plateaued or even slightly declined as there's been a more gravitation towards digital checkouts. And the one exception would be at Aspen Drive, at least, is that our children's collection circulation has increased, and I attribute that to the large number of families moving into the area. But traditional hardcovers, and especially traditional media, has declined somewhat. So I frankly think that our collection space will be adequate. In terms of general seating areas, it remains to be seen, how long it would take for us to exhaust that. But we're increasing, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head in terms of the number of increased spaces. But in terms of programming, one of the things about the programming space is that we have a lot of different options available. You'll see in your handouts a room called the Flex Space, which is a flexible room that can accommodate our after-school kids during after-school hours, but it also transforms into a maker space at other times, and then programming space at other times. We intend to also have the kids occupy the space in our children's area so that the kids have two different areas they go to and then leave the rest of the building for adults who have really been clamoring for a quieter area. So to answer your question, I think in terms of collections, we're fine. Programming, I think we've laid out some good options for us to accommodate the increased needs we have for our current programming.
Okay. Putting aside that we all would like to see another library at Alexandria architecturally built in town, but knowing that the reality of modern government doesn't really permit that kind of building anymore, I noticed before you pulled up this packet presentation, you had, for lack of a better way to put it, renderings or what the inside looks like.
Yeah.
Can we see what the inside looks like? Because I think that's really the focus, at least from my standpoint, needs to be made, is that, would we like a monumental structure? Of course. Would we like something architecturally significant? Of course. But it's got to work for, I think, as Commissioner Hessner said, for the inside where the actual magic happens, so to speak, at a library. So what are we looking at is going to be in this building?
I appreciate that question. Actually, I didn't want to interrupt earlier, but I think there's a couple things that happen in glass buildings or buildings that have predominantly glass. One is throughout the day, you look at them, and at night you look through them, or they sort of reverse, and you see the interior of the building. And I think we did focus a lot of our energy. We did have options that we did look at for the pavilion type of architecture on the outside of the building, and came up with a design, one that kept a main focus on the high space that's of the existing building. I think that's one of the major features of this building, and I think we tried to have a bit of respect for that. Maybe
Wait, if you can go back to that one. Go back one.
I'm trying, sorry.
Oh, if you can. Okay. Behind the woman with the dog and the person jogging in blue
Yep.
is a green space or a lawn. I
Correct.
think that's what we were probably talking about.
Yep.
That if you have, the ability to or the funds, is that something, because there's a door that exits? Could
There
be?
are multiple doors that
Okay.
exit onto this space.
I know that's right. Is that the kind of space that the library could look at to, I guess, creating an inside and an outside of the library for the kind of things that we're talking about? Not necessarily on Lot 2. This is still on your lot.
It most certainly could. In fact, the original, back in 2007, when the original building was being designed, we had planned to have a reading garden just off of that door on the left side of your screen.
Right.
Funds did not permit us to do that.
Okay.
So is it something, that the butterfly garden or the reading garden is something that is mentioned on occasion for us to embark upon. So I know our board would love to do that.
Okay, so let's go inside now.
Sure. Actually, walking in the door of the space is now the cafe. We're turning into the multi-purpose maker space that David had spoke about earlier. We really felt like this space, actually, when you walk in, the nice part about it is throughout the day it can act as a maker or craft area for adults, but as teens come out of school or the kids come out of school, this can actually act as a spill space and be reconfigured kind of for whatever need it is. The thing that we didn't want to have, I think a lot of the discussion today has been about space as being precious. So we wanted 0 rooms to be empty throughout the day. So this room has the ability to be multi-tasked and also be transparent. So whatever's happening in there is actually marketing for the library, and it is right off the entry. So it is a new kind of visual entry. Currently, when you walk in the library, you see the cafe and kind of the teen space, which is sort of an odd mixture. And then behind it is tucked a quiet study, and behind that is tucked a computer lab. And I don't think a lot of people know or take advantage of those spaces that are currently in the building. And then, again, the color. I think the color is something the building lacks a bit now, and we're pretty proud of the way the design turned out in that. This is the desk that we're placing. We're moving the desk, which is hidden now in the sort of children's adult area. This desk will be right in front of where the addition starts. The front of the desk will be predominantly for reference and adult collections. The back of the desk is for children's coming past. You can see we've wrapped a sort of colorful soffit around the top, which signifies the entrance into children's, and you can see the changing carpet. And looking through the glass, you do see we had some ideas about some exterior fins we were thinking about putting on the building, which were a perforated metal, powder-coated metal, which would actually change the shadow of the sun coming into the building and look at different identities, knowing it was a children's pavilion for the design. This is the space that you were speaking about actually earlier. So at the end of this space is the quiet study. The high space lowering to the low space, which is sort of an odd way of putting it. But that soffit allowed us to just add a bit of a glass wall and have it be quiet. What we try to do, especially in libraries today, is instead of an entire library having a volume on it, which is medium, we try to give spaces that are extremely quiet and amped down, and then spaces that are allowed to be quiet, more loud and amped up. So by creating this spot in the corner, which has some of the more beautiful views out of the building, we were able to give the adults or people that wanted to study a place to be more quiet, amped down quiet, and allowing the building, again, to have more volume in it and be more social. This is a picture of the quiet study, so we're adding a small fireplace, building upon the stone that's there. I think this is important. So this is the children's area. So we have a 600 square foot skylight that's actually placed on top of the building. You can see it encircled in purple in the back there. We've actually turned it into a cylinder. Considering that the addition is a little bit deep, we wanted to get natural light back into it. We have this idea of carpeting is this really abstract painted flower that actually moves itself throughout the space. There's pops of color. We have a hard surface floor here for crafts for people to be messy, so they don't have to worry about getting things and ruining things. And then coming through the space, the idea of the lights were this idea of sketches. So we have these colorful sketches coming throughout the space, leading back to the early learning area in the back, which is ideas of pretend play, where kids can kind of learn by doing instead of learn by staring and sort of being told what to do. So it's kind of this beautiful idea of early learning and literacy. So I think the interior, especially the interior of the building, regardless of direction, has very much an identity towards the youth. I think that will be visible as the building is passed by. There was a direction or an idea of expanding the building and being respectful of the building that's there. It actually is a pretty successful building in terms of its exterior aesthetic. And so we did, I think the skylight is one part that is a signature space within there. I think there are some elements that we discussed along the outside. There is a possible phasing that we looked at for the site. Monies weren't available at this time, but we did look at berms and ideas of sculpting that back grass in the back. And another part of it was that the school project was sort of coming along as we were designing also. We weren't entirely sure where watershed and grading was left to be done. So we were asked to kind of hold off on that for a bit, possibly for a different phase.
What is the square footage usable now of the current building?
20,000.
Okay, so this is,
Usable, sorry, that's gross.
okay,
So probably take 80% of that,
Give or take.
70% of that.
okay. And we're adding 7,500, so we're adding what? 35, 40%, something like that, depending on how you calculate it?
That's close.
Okay.
We don't have, the fire stair, then there's a bit of a core on the back. We don't have a huge core. We have a single run stair that comes up, so it has a small footprint on the front, on the first floor, and the back floor is a double stair. We're seeing that as more communicative. One additional thing that we have done, and I'm sorry if I'm interrupting,
No.
is we've planned for actually a stair, a public stair, should the basement become public. Currently, it's the children's office. That office would be removed. There'd be and we left space in the basement to have an open stair that would come down and feed the elevator, so that if the basement was used for something other than storage and or admin, it would feel like part of a public space.
Okay. Can you explain, so it's on the record, you're asking for preliminary and final plat of easement approval. What is the easement?
The easement is for the access road on the easternmost part of the property in the event that a road connecting Phillip road to the planned kindergarten building is constructed.
So without jumping the gun, you're talking about some of the proposal that comes after you this evening.
I'm sorry, could you
You're
rephrase
talking about the
question?
proposal that comes after you this evening? the
Correct,
next-
yes, yes, yes.
Um,
And not to interrupt, I
Yeah.
think the village had asked us to go ahead with that so that they would have the opportunity for flexibility for future use of that property. So
Fair enough. From staff's perspective, Mike, why is there a request for an easement here, not actually just a public taking or public road for the library district?
The request for the easement was really just to allow, the village may never need to use that easement, but in light of the traffic congestion on Aspen Road, also in light of the fact there's still one more vacant parcel south of the Aquatic Center, and if that's ever developed, how can we exit traffic out of there? There is opportunity to exit traffic on the east side of the Aquatic Center and the Park District property, ultimately up through the library, and then onto Phillips. We may never use that option, but that easement keeps that option in place should we ever need that.
So it's a safety valve.
Exactly.
But you want it as an easement, not proper you fully control through an actual fee?
Correct. The village's wish is just to have access rights for ingress and egress.
Fair enough. Okay. Anybody else?
I wish you'd started your presentation with showing us the interiors.
Us too.
There was, and the insides look great. I like the colors. I like how the spaces kind of flow. But I'm hung up on the basement. The basement's not going to have any of that. It's a basement. And you're talking about expanding into that and all these great images and colors and light and natural light. None of that would happen. So I go back to make the building bigger on grade so you can have these great nice spaces for the community. And
You know-
you said your collections aren't growing except for kids. You don't want to throw the kids in the basement.
Oh, we would never do that, no. The only public space that I envision down there would be study rooms, meeting rooms, some technology space, not the type of space that people would want to experience the library with their kids or just as casual reading, so.
Yeah, but they have to go through the kids' area to get to it.
To get to the basement? Actually.
The stair that we did is in front of the elevator on the other
Yeah.
side. So we tried planning for, a delineation of identity, I'll say.
Anybody else?
Great question.
Okay, Jim?
Can you go over exactly what you're doing currently with the parking lot, and if you were to develop the basement, where you're planning to put that extra parking?
Sure. So currently, what we're doing is expanding the parking lot here along this edge. The school is being built along where the bar just popped up in New England. Should we expand the basement, the parking would be located here to the north.
Not here.
So as you can see, the dark lines here, there's currently parking here, but we opened it up for drive lanes to get to the new lot.
And how many spaces are you adding under your current plan?
21. Currently, the library is overspaced. I know that's a funny thing to talk about, considering the language that was just used. But by code, we have more spaces than were required. So with the 21, we're at code with,
140. We exceed code by one, yeah.
we're one over without considering the basement. And we have done drawings that looked at where to expand future parking to make sure that we hadn't, I think someone said, designed themselves in a corner.
I'm sorry, let's go to the north side again. Are you
Yes, sir.
adding parking there, or is that?
No, sir. There actually is a decent grade back here currently in the corner. So the parking lot would be,
I
I'll
think
say more.
he's
No,
asking
current
now.
plan. Current plan.
Currently, yes.
It's all existing?
Yes, this is all existing, and there's an island here, and then this is the drive-through for the.
You're adding 5 spaces there.
You are correct. We are adding 5 spaces
Okay,
here.
that's what I wanted.
I apologize. I'm sorry. I spaced that out.
And that
Does
area,
that interfere at all with the drive-through there?
It doesn't, and we see those as staff spaces. We see those as spaces to relieve staff parking in the other part of the lot, and those will probably end up being assigned.
Is there an entrance for them on that side of
There
the
is
building?
the staff entrance. There's an entrance to the building here, and there's also a staff entrance here that goes directly into their staff lounge. I'm sorry about that. That's my fault. Thank you.
Mike, a question for you is, I know that Dave has looked at this thing forever and a day regarding stormwater. Dave had always reserved that upper northeast corner for potential detention and release. Like, worst case scenario, someplace else where they could detain water. Is he, my question to you, is he solid on Victory Center being able to accommodate almost complete surface development of Lot 2, accommodate for stormwater?
He is. In fact, if that access drive we spoke of were constructed on the east property line and connected to Phillips Road, there would still be enough excess capacity to accommodate that extra impervious surface.
Okay, that's good.
And just so everyone's aware too, the grade is from north to south, and it's about 6 feet. It's quite a bit, so retention would always, I think, be in the southeast corner, if anywhere, even if development.
Okay, anybody else? Okay. Do you want to add anything before we ask for public comment?
No, I appreciate the good questions and the feedback.
Okay. This is a public hearing, and therefore, at this point, if anyone from the public wishes to speak with respect to this request by the Cook Memorial Public Library District, this would be their opportunity to do so. If you do, we ask you come forward and give us your name and where you live. Anyone? All right. Seeing that there is no great rush to the podium, at that point, unless someone wants to speak, we can close the public comment portion of this meeting. Are there any other questions from anyone on the commission? Okay. We have a standing motion in this commission to recommend approval that we then vote one way or the other. You've asked for 3 requests this afternoon or this evening. The first being, it would be a motion to recommend approval to amend the special use permit subject to the conditions contained in the staff report, which are 1A, to allow an addition to a public building commonly referred to as the Cook Memorial Public Library, Aspen Drive Library, located in Lot 1, and 2, to allow the expansion of parking lot and related improvements on Lots 1 and 2 of the Cook Memorial subdivision. And we need a second for that.
I'll second.
And that is subject to the 8 conditions for approval that were provided in our board packet. That also is contingent upon the fact that public notices were sent to surrounding property owners, and we note that no comments are received, and we also make part of our record the ordinance 18.3 section written responses from the library district. Okay, so with that,
So we are currently looking at just number 1.
the amendment, yes. Okay, so any comments with regard to the amendment? Okay, hearing none, we need a roll call vote.
Commissioner Hesner,
Yes.
Commissioner Mulcro,
Yes.
Commissioner Baloo,
Yes.
Commissioner Cotton,
Yes.
Commissioner Heitner,
Yes.
Chairman Morris.
Yes. Okay. Secondly, we have a motion to recommend approval of final site and landscape plans and building elevations for the property, subject to the conditions previously referenced. And we need a second for that.
Hal, before
Sure.
we get a second on that, would it be acceptable if we split that into building and landscape?
Sure. Okay. So let's do 2. Let's do a motion to recommend approval of final site and landscape plans. Do it that way?
Yes.
And then we'll do, okay. Subject to the conditions we've already just referenced. We need a second for just site and landscape plans.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion from the commission?
Yeah, I do. I think that although the landscaping around the addition itself is very nice, I don't think the landscaping's finished at this time. I think there needs to be a little bit more brought forward before a final solution can be accepted.
Okay. Anybody else?
Is there something in particular you were thinking?
Absolutely. In the green space adjacent to, although I would like to see something on Lot 2 as well, I think it's probably more reasonable to ask for something within the open quadrant of the building that's just to the east and south, no, it's just to the south of the new addition, that area that is north of the path. I think something needs to go in there. Benches, some reading area, someplace, more trees, something needs to go in there to finish that space.
I would sort of like to ask the petitioner, I recall when the library first came through, that you were going to develop that area with outside things, and you did mention that.
The reading
And,
part, yeah.
and I think the presentation at the time stressed that you didn't have the funds to do it, but you were going to seek donations from the community. Did that ever come to fruition? Obviously it didn't. Why was that never pursued?
You know, that was under, I wasn't director at that time, so I can't speak to the reasons for that. And so I know that that's been something that appears now and then as far as a discussion point with our board of trustees, but I don't know the answer as to why that wasn't pursued.
Okay. Do you think that might be a good opportunity to pursue that?
I
at
certainly
this
think it's something we could mention, that I could mention to the board as an opportunity.
And I think on the other side of the component of the site and landscaping discussion is, I believe this project is underparked. I really do feel that the site requires more parking overall because of the regional need and because of what the goal was of the village from the very beginning, to use Lot 2 as a common, an area of common accommodation, dealing with need of the region. And the region is parking, has a parking
I
need.
understand what you're saying, but can you penalize this petitioner for that parking?
I don't think we're penalizing this petitioner because, quite honestly, I think that lower level is going to get developed as something quicker than we may fathom. And maybe there's already plans that we're not really, that's why I was hoping that there would be someone from the board here tonight, from the library board, to discuss some of that, because I think that there's such a space need for this library that lower level is extremely important to these people. And I think it's going to be used sooner than later, much sooner. So I think parking is a real big deal.
Okay, anybody else? My comment would be, I recognize that there's a reality between modern government financing and what we would all want. Wants are wonderful things. Needs are perhaps what we need to meet in government. And at least what I've heard from the testimony of the professional staff of the library, your testimony supports that this meets your needs. Does it meet all of your wants and the village's wants? It sounds like perhaps no. That given a purely blank slate with an open checkbook, my guess is you could have done far more and perhaps gotten us, our monumental building, which we would not have, refused. When you did show us the interior, that is what really pushed the balance to me, that the needs, when you balance against some of the other things we want, are met, and it kind of pushes it, puts it over the line, so to speak, on my hand. The comments made by the other commissioners, I agree, are things that probably will come to fruition. I don't know when. That's the crystal ball that we all need to get. And when it does, I'm sure we'll see you again, and we'll have to address these once again to meet the needs, and hopefully then we can pick up some more of the wants. At least we're getting some of the wants here. We're getting bigger programming. We're getting an improved children's area. We're getting what is certainly a very, for lack of a better way to put it, attractive interior library, as well as some interesting facets in the back. And I can say that even from someone who lives in the village but does not live in the library district. I live in a different library district, Vernon. So to that extent, I think the pragmatics are what's pushing me. So anybody else have any comments? If not, we need a roll call, and we're doing final site and landscape only at this point.
Commissioner Heidner,
Yes.
Commissioner Mulcrone,
No.
Commissioner Baloo,
Yes.
Commissioner Cotton,
Yes.
Commissioner Hesner,
No.
Chairman Morris.
Yes. All right. Next, we have a motion to recommend approval of the building elevations as submitted for the property subject to the conditions that we've discussed. And we need a second for that.
Second.
Okay, any discussion with regard to that?
Just a follow-up question. You said, I think I heard the figure 600,000 for a second story. Is that,
Structure the building for a second story.
I'm sorry?
It's footings and steel. It's not the second story of the building.
Oh, good point to make,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's just
That's just,
to make the
that's the
first
the roof-
floor
the roof of
eligible.
a structural deck.
But not having a second story on the addition.
No.
You're talking about putting a second story on the main building.
No.
I
I'm
was
saying
commenting-
In order to, for a possible future expansion of a second floor on the addition, we would have to size the members of the roof to be for a slab. We'd more or less have to build a slab prior to that being, the roof being put on. And that's about $500,000 in footings and extra weight in steel. The loads of a roof are very different than loads of a live load.
Well, you're creating a floor instead of a roof.
Correct.
Right.
I'm just trying.
Yeah. But did that answer your question?
No. So that's only a partial of a second story.
There's no, there would be, you would not notice the difference today. The structure of the roof would be the actual structure of a floor with nothing built above it. And the
Right,
reason you do that is so
right,
you don't
but
have to build a floor while
What I
the
was trying to
space
get
becomes
at is,
occupied.
some of the conversation has round around building a two-story addition.
Understood.
What is the incremental cost for that?
I would say, I'm going to be, I mean, between $300 and $400 a square foot, I would say. I don't know if that's in addition to the $500,000. You're kind of putting me on the spot slightly. So that would equate to 7,500 square feet times 4, that's 2.8 million. So about between $2 and $3 million. That seems high, but yeah,
Seems extremely high.
I know, I'm just shooting from the hip. We'd have to look at, because you don't have the site costs, you have furniture costs, there's nothing to put in there.
And I will say that the board did identify that second floor option as something that they considered, and they wanted to get pricing on that, and as soon as they discovered that it would cost $585,000 just to shore up the building in order to construct on top of that, they immediately set that aside as something that they didn't want to consider because of the cost. So, but it certainly was something that they initially wanted and wanted to explore.
But I think you're talking about two different things. You're talking about building on top of the building, which doesn't actually make sense, versus building a two-story addition, which in my opinion makes more sense. And you really didn't price the two-story addition.
I see
instead
what
of
you're saying.
doing the
Yeah,
basement. Yeah.
correct. I was mistaken. You're correct. Mhm.
I think those fins are great in the rendering.
Thank you.
I think those colored fins, I really feel that does something for a very vanilla box. You know, it gives some character. Dave, go.
You're not going to like this, Scott, but the board actually decided not to add those colored fins, so.
That does not surprise me at all. This board is known for making odd decisions.
It was an their reasoning was that $85,000, in their opinion, could be spent better on the interior of the building. And that's an area that faced east. In their opinion, there were a limited number of people who would see the building from that vantage, so. And
But
I'm
that's
just-
like talking about people that only make left turns. You can only make a left turn, but you know what? Eventually you come back around and you're facing the same direction.
That was pretty deep.
You know, honestly, boy, you know, for 85 grand, a decision like that, for $85,000. $85,000.
They have limited funds, they're spending it what they think is best.
You know what, Jim? There's ways to find $85,000 in the public realm, especially when you're paying taxes and I'm paying taxes and everybody else who lives here is paying taxes. There's ways to find $85,000. What it comes down to is a decision by a board that's blind to what the public may want to see.
Okay, anybody else with respect to the building elevations?
Just one thing to further talk about Jeff's comment. You know, with this elevation, you know, somehow getting light downstairs. I think it's paramount to get light down to that lower level because it's a library.
It's unusable for public to be in a dark space. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to disagree with that because I've been in Cook library in their basement, and it's perfectly acceptable.
There's light that goes down there
I've never seen
from
outside
the,
light.
from the south.
There are skylights on the far south side of the basement, so.
So you need to go to the far south side,
Yeah,
Jim.
not the rooms I've been in.
Yeah, well, that's the teen area, you probably wouldn't be there that much.
Are you making like, tapes down there, Jim? Music tapes? Okay.
It's been a while. I haven't been there for 10 years because we have this one.
All right, any other comments with respect to the building elevations? If not, do we have a second, Mike?
Yeah, we have a second from Commissioner Cotton.
Okay, so we need a roll call.
Commissioner Hesner,
No.
Commissioner Heidner,
Yes.
Commissioner Mulcrone,
No.
Commissioner Baloo,
No.
Commissioner Cotton,
No.
Chairman Morris.
Yes. Okay. Next, we have a motion to recommend a preliminary and final plat of easement approval for the property commonly known as the Cook Memorial subdivision, subject to the conditions that we've discussed. We need a second for that.
Second?
Any discussion with regard to the preliminary and final plat of easement? Okay, we need a roll call.
Commissioner Hesner,
Yes.
Commissioner Heidner,
Yes.
Commissioner Mulcrone,
No.
Commissioner Baloo,
Yes.
Commissioner Cotton,
Yes.
Chairman Morris.
No. Okay, I think that's it. It's scheduled at the village board, or will be, or what do they need to do next?
February 5th, we'll have this on the committee of the whole meeting before the village board. We'll see you there.
Okay, thank you, best of luck. Okay. Let's take a very quick couple-minute break, and then we'll reconvene with case 1801, which is a petition filed by the Vernon Hills Park District. So we're in recess for, let's say, until, well, 5 minutes, until 1:45.
To the building, kind of the program within the building, and then the exterior elevations and some bird shots. So everything you have in your packets is what we'll have on the screen tonight. Don, if you want to start with the site, again, use the mouse so that they can see where you're pointing.
Okay, I can. All right, thank you. Excuse me. Just a little bit of background on the project. We came before the Plan Commission with a concept presentation back in February of 2018. At that point in time, the plan looked a little different than it does today. We still had bus circulation coming from Aspen and exiting Phillip Road to the north and in front of the Victory Center. We also had the plan where passenger traffic for parent pickup and drop-off was entering the site from the Victory Center, coming in, going southbound, making the drop-off in front of the sidewalk, looping back around, and then exiting to the north. The queuing at that point was to be along Phillip Road for any of the stacking of cars as you're waiting on pickup or drop-off in the morning. And the bus entrance was a two-way from Aspen to the gate, which allowed us entrance to the service drive. Beyond that, it was a one-way circulation pattern. As a result of meeting with the Victory Center and the stakeholders, changes to the plan were made, which are reflected on the plan that you see before you today. The Victory Center expressed concerns about any type of drive and queuing in the front of their, or on the north side of their facility. So we, at the village's request, we eliminated the Phillip Road connection, and we basically kept the same alignment for the bus routing, which would be west from Aspen to east routing. However, the exit point now changed to coming along an existing drive on the south side of Victory Center, which the village has easement access rights for. The passenger, excuse me, Passenger drop-offs would now come through, the site plan's not quite out far enough, but they would come through the main entrance into the Sullivan Center. Okay, very good. Here you can see a little bit more. So we're coming in through the Sullivan Center. Basically, we're queuing around, and then we enter from a south to north direction. We reverse this turnaround. Trying to find my, so we reverse the turnaround. So now you've got drop-off on curbside in front of the main entrance. We have provided, I keep losing my mouse here. We provided a bypass lane and parking along the eastern edge of the turnaround area. And this parking is predominantly for parents who need to come and get a call that the kid's sick, they need to pick them up. It gives them a place close to the entrance, and it also gives us some ADA parking right up to the front. After the parents have made their drop-off or pickup, then they will exit along the same route eastbound out to Atrium. The queuing, as you can see, we initially designed the queuing for 35 cars based upon numbers that we were provided from the school district based on their operations. There was some concern with the stakeholders that that may not be sufficient. So working with Sullivan Center, we're allowed to use the aquatic lot, and we're able to double stack cars and queue up to 80 vehicles on this lot so that we have plenty of room for queuing and stacking without impacting any of the operations along the front of the Sullivan
Put numbers
Center.
aside.
Pardon?
Put the numbers aside. How does this work? What is the distance from the exit of the building to where these cars are queuing? Are you going to have a concierge out there, directing people like valet parking when to go out? How does this work? I don't get it.
Dave, do you want to talk
I
to the
think
procedures about drop?
Yeah, this being to address the need to identify the maximum capacity, having resurveyed our principals and having spoken to parents, we've identified 37 practical pickups typically. And just to give you some...
Fair enough. Count 37 off from your entrance. Where are you? You're probably at least to the parking islands? How far is that, and how does it, I don't understand how this works.
Then the pickup process, where students are brought out.
So to answer your question, 37 out, where would that be done approximately?
It's going to be approximately down to that.
Out there, yeah.
Right about where you're at.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
So it's a process in most of our schools. Again, let me just go over some enrollment numbers. We've got 302 kindergarten students. At Elementary South, the current enrollment is 714. So it would be an enrollment of about 40% of what we see at Elementary South. So nothing like the other schools, much less as far as enrollment. And we don't foresee 80 cars.
But you just said 37. So
Yeah.
explain to me how this will work.
Sure,
It's
it's a
the end of,
process
it's the end of
that-
the school day. The children are released. You've got all these cars parked. How do you get the kids into the cars?
It's pretty efficient, actually.
How?
It takes about 5 to 10 minutes at all of our schools
How?
daily. What happens is that students are queued up near the entrance, and those that facilitate this operation, they've got walkie-talkies, and we've learned which parent is at the door, and
It's almost like you haven't been on Aspen Drive in the morning and the afternoon. I drove my kids to those schools for, all the way through, 8th grade, and there are hundreds of cars for each school. And you can wait in line. If there's a snow day, I've waited in line over a half hour just to get to Middle South. And then to pick up, the same. So I don't understand where you're coming up with 37 cars. It's going to be triple that, especially for younger kids. I don't understand the 37. It seems absurd. It's going to be over 100.
Yeah, so that's based upon a survey of our staff, identifying the students that are
You
currently
have two
picked up.
people outside as your staff. How do they know how many cars are coming?
No, the current staff, the current kindergarten students in our current schools, we surveyed them to identify how many kids are picked up. And that's how we arrived at 37.
And then the
And this being centrally located, so it's going to serve the entire community. We also foresee an increase in the number of students being bused versus picked up as a result as well.
More kids are driven to our schools than bused. Just from, as a parent driving, it seems that most kids are with their parents in the car, especially if it's raining or snowing. They're not letting their kids wait at the bus stop. They drive them.
It's less than ideal. I mean, Aspen is single lane going each way. But to minimize the impact, we've come up with a scenario to push traffic from west to east. That is one way to minimize the impact, as well as to offset the start and end times of the school to minimize the overall effect on that road as well.
Let's hop back to what the chairman asked. How does this work? How are you gonna, you have somebody out in the parking lot and Sullivan Center there directing traffic so they stack two cars up?
So the first week
Across?
we do, we've got quite a bit of staffing out there the first week, but parents typically by day 3, day 4 have a good understanding of the system, and there is minimal cutting as well. Often it's self-regulated by the other parents. But at the door itself, it's pretty efficient after about day 3. The entire operation takes 5 to 10 minutes on an ideal day, but then you have snow days where it's worse.
Okay, so you pick up some, after waiting in line, and the valet indicates that your parent's car is there, and you get in the parent's car. Where does the car then go?
All right. Try to find the mouse again on here.
You got it.
Okay, so you're queued up, you're progressing through the line.
Uh-huh.
You veer to the left so that you're curbside.
Right.
You pick up your kid, you exit, you come out, and then you exit to the east to Atrium along the south side of the Victory Center. So that would be a fairly fluid movement as soon as,
What happens once you get on Atrium?
once you get on Atrium, it depends, you either turn north or you turn south, depending on which way you need to go.
And do you have any kind of, and I can't believe I'm saying this, do you have any kind of traffic study the like in terms of how this movement's going to be and the number of cars going each direction, et cetera?
We've looked at the stacking as far as how they would back up. So 35 cars, if you're parked all the way down at Atrium waiting to exit, would come back to about the point that the pointer is right here. One of the things that we were strongly looking at and recommended to do was reduce the traffic on Aspen. So there were a couple of ways to do that. The first way that we looked at that was using Phillip Road Extended as a means to get the traffic off of Aspen, both incoming and outgoing, with only bus traffic. After the stakeholder meeting with Victory Center, we were advised that that was not a viable option by the village. At that point, we looked at multiple options on how to get the traffic out of here without putting them back on Aspen. And this was really the only viable option that we had to get the traffic back out of there. It does get the traffic off of Aspen. Incoming traffic will come in from Aspen, but outgoing, predominantly, anybody going through this pickup line will be directed out to Atrium. And where they turn from that point will be dependent upon what type of route they choose.
I have a question for you. In all the options that you looked at as far as working with Phillip Drive, were they always two-way options, or were any of them just one-way exiting the site?
We had looked at doing a similar west to east, basically coming in through the center, exiting through Phillip, and going out to the east. However, that still placed the traffic incoming on Aspen. So at that point.
Incoming.
Right. So at that point, we.
It would function like this option does.
Correct.
Okay.
You just
Now-
have a different exit point.
Yeah. Okay, now, That was one question. And how was that received? The one-way option?
The, quite honestly, the residents at Victory Center were not happy with any type of traffic pattern that was going to put traffic at the front of their building.
Okay, so in this one that puts considerable traffic in the rear of the building, in between parking for their building and their building, how did they receive this?
I was not at the meeting after this presentation was made. However, from the stakeholder meeting that we went to, it was evident that there was more traffic, more movement along the front as far as drop-offs go, deliveries go, concerns over emergency vehicles and whatnot. The time frame that we're looking at, plus because the queuing is outside the limits of the Victory Center, there's not going to be that long queue of traffic other than, the few people waiting to make their turns.
It's not a queue, but it's a stream of traffic, maybe buses,
A
stream during a certain period of time.
It's basically everybody who's coming in will be exiting through that point. As far as the timeline, Abe has mentioned that timeline is fairly quick based upon the efficiencies that they've built on getting the kids out to the bus.
The buses
to the
depart all
cars.
at once, so its traffic will stop. And in about a minute or less, it'll be constant. 6 buses would leave, and that would be it as it relates to buses. So it wouldn't be ongoing, it would be all at once.
Did you folks talk with any of the other occupants in that office area back there?
At the stakeholder meeting, is that the one you're referring to?
I'm not sure which meeting I'm referring to. I'm just wondering if you had spoken with, in general.
In general, the meetings that I was involved in with the Victory Center, at that point, we were looking at that Phillip Road extended. We had really not thought that we had an option of coming in through the south side. Being that was a public road, the ability to link the Sullivan Center with Phillip Road in case of functions where you had a secondary access for events that might be taking place seemed to be a viable idea then.
But this is a one-way, though.
Currently? Currently, it functions as a one-way. If an emergency vehicle needs to get in there, it's wide enough for two-way traffic. Obviously, we have a one lane for the drop-off. We have a bypass lane in case somebody gets in here and needs to either park or has dropped off and needs to skip the line and get through. This is also wide enough for 2 lanes of traffic. However, by striping, we're trying to neck that down to where we're positioning that vehicle as he would normally drive along a street for his right turn.
You just made an interesting comment. Someone has dropped off and wants to then bypass it. How can you drop off a kindergarten and then bypass it? Are you talking about, you've just admitted they're going to drop off in the parking lot, parents. Which I would tell you bothers me, but
Well,
I know.
I think it might be more for the ability for people that need to park their child and walk them in or come and get them in the middle. They would be able to pull up and park in those few spaces and assist their child into the building if necessary.
Okay. So you're going to change your comment. It wouldn't be people that dropped off.
Okay. Obviously, my wording was not the best that it could be. However, we do not anticipate that people would be dropping off from the bypass lane or back over in this area. There will be parents who are going to come up here and park here and then walk in, unless that's stopped by staff. I mean, that's human nature.
Operationally, we would cone that off operationally during pickup and drop-off to flow all of that traffic through the main drive.
What does a parent do if they have a child at, let's say, Middle South and one in kindergarten or one in Elementary South or Aspen, and they have to go to 2 schools to drop their kid off. What do they do if they have to drop the kindergartner off first? Do they have to then drive through Deer Path back up to Aspen or go on to Town Line? What would prevent them from parking in the Sullivan lot and walking their child to the front door and then getting back to go back to the other schools?
Well, obviously, there are no controls we're going to put in from a parking striping standpoint that's going to regulate that type of, parental behavior. That might happen. That is something that could only be regulated by staff and basically looking at how your operations are going and trying to educate the parents on the way that this is going to best work for them to do their drop-offs for the kindergarten. The Sullivan Center has had a concern about the parents skipping the queuing line and parking out here and dropping off and then going back out Aspen. And honestly, that's a very difficult thing to monitor.
That would be the most practical thing for a parent to do, though.
It very well could be.
And do you have a larger diagram of showing the exiting of the 6 buses and 37 cars onto the atrium? Like, where do they go after they're in the parking lot of the Victory Center? What happens?
Oh, we don't have one.
Yeah,
that
beyond
goes-
that point,
Pardon?
beyond that point, what's the traffic study showing where they go? Right here, so you can either go right or left, and then it's up to them.
It was either do that or put them back out on Aspen. So we can introduce them over here and let them find their route back over to the drop-offs and pickups, which the school is staggering times to work with that. Or else you put them back out on Aspen, which is adding to congestion that is already bad out there.
You'll probably find a majority of these parents will have kids in multiple schools if you're segregating kindergarten from 1st through 5th and then 6th through 8th. So they're going to find their way back to Aspen anyways.
Well, they're going to have to plan their routes out. There's no doubt about that.
They'll go to Augusta. They'll loop around through Augusta Drive. Well, it's not necessarily the long way at that time of day because getting out on Town Line Road could take infinitely longer than going back through the neighborhood.
It's obvious that, the location that we have here, working with the positioning of the building, which works with the Sullivan Center as far as shared amenities go, and some of the constraints we have, it's a difficult project to make everybody happy.
Did the school board look at other sites in town for a better location for a building? And what would those sites be?
Well, over the last, 2 or 3 years, looked at many different options. Looked at reutilizing vacant warehouses to, constructing new, a new school, all by itself. Looked at multiple locations, multiple options were explored.
Like where?
Specifically?
Yeah.
Carrie, do you remember the address or the locations specifically? The retail warehouses, I can send you follow-up information later as it relates to where we visited, and Sonali's here as well.
So we did look at a lot of options to look for specific construction sites. We looked for repurposing, which was called adaptive reuse of a lot of industrial, so along the Fairway and Lakeview, around that. We looked at Atrium, the office buildings which are out there itself, which were empty. We looked at that. We looked at the parcel which is next to the Aquatic Center, which is open. We looked at some space in Mundelein too. So all the spaces that were available, we looked at them. Our architects as well as Lamb Construction actually priced it out onto building the buildings that would fit on that site according to the school code. So we went through that. We had about 6 or 7 community meetings, which we went through all of these before we finalized on this plan.
But you are building a whole brand-new building.
Yes,
What's
but
the difference in?
the size of
site
the-
south, let's just say the site south of the pool, which is a huge area, you could have as much parking as you wanted, the same exact building if you wanted to. Why not go there?
There were some efficiencies by designing this particular addition. There's not an additional gym space that needs to be constructed. It's shared with the Park District. There's also, in partnering with the Park District at this facility, the Park District can use the common spaces within the school district. So there were some efficiencies gained by doing this. There was also studies, in particular, this particular plan, you'll see when I show the floor plans, but it was shown at one point as a single-story plan. But because we have tiny people with tiny legs, the transition times and their proximity to be able to get to some of these shared spaces was going to be an issue. So we opted for a very efficient 2-story classroom addition to the existing Sullivan Center so that amenities could be shared between the Park District and the school.
We do also have an intergovernmental agreement with the Park District and a long waiting list on our HAP program, our after-school program, and this space is ideal to maximize that opportunity for the Park District as well.
For just kindergartners?
Correct, for this building.
Can you straighten some, excuse me, can you straighten something out for me? That the incoming for the buses, it shows 2 lanes. That is two lanes moving in the same direction. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Then why is there a stop line at the top by Aspen
Okay,
at the exit point?
we are two-way traffic from the entrance to this point right here where we have a gate.
Okay.
So that we can provide service vehicles
Okay.
the ability to get in here.
Got it.
Beyond that point, it is one-way eastward circulation for buses only.
I'm sure you talked about this a great deal, but there's really nothing other than signage to prevent a vehicle from exiting the site, wanting to take a left and heading out towards Aspen down that 2-lane road.
We do have physical gates that will be manned by, I don't know that it shows up on this. Can we get,
You want to go back to the other
let's
one?
go back to the other plan.
There you go. Right in this.
All right.
Location, yeah, there you go.
Okay, so we have a gate that will be operated by school personnel that will shut that after the bus traffic has exited. We have another gate, I think, down here so that we can close that off at that point whenever drop-offs and all have cleared out. And I believe, it's hard to see at this scale, that we also have a gate here so that we can effectively close this entire area off and force traffic to go in different directions. If we
So even though it's wide enough for 2-way traffic as you enter the Victory Center site, and you're showing arrows that go both directions, it's really not both directions at that site. That's only for an emergency condition?
There is two-way traffic down through here because whenever the queue clears out, patrons of the Victory Center that want to get in here and park are going to be going westbound. So they won't be able to access this area because the gate will be closed off at that point in time. But once this is closed off, this gate, then this whole area continues to act as it does today, two-way traffic and basically a parking lot function.
But where's the car going to go? I mean, if it's,
Well, you've got the people that enter off of the atrium, which come down, and these are parking along here. So even though the arrows are probably a little misleading, they really function back here.
is a one-way?
Yes. So
Okay.
there's really no place for them to go beyond this other than if they're going to turn and park in here, or they're going to turn and park down to the south.
Do you feel there would any modifications to that driveway in between the Victory Center and the parking structure? Would there be a need for any modifications to that road, that connector?
Right in here,
The one that extends all the way?
Further south, further east, right?
East.
Yes.
To the east, no. The only modifications we anticipate are, right now, this is curbed off. So in order to open that up, we have to modify an island that's in there, and then we have to, you can almost see the edge of an island here. So we have to just open this up, and we'll have to do a little bit of grading work in there. But as far as widening that, it's already wide enough for two-way traffic. I think it's a minimum of 24 feet.
See, I know that Vernon Hills is very strict on how their roads are constructed, and they can really handle a lot of traffic. I mean, they construct them, their requirements are considerable for roads. But this road that connects what you're showing here to the public roadway through Victory Center,
Correct.
that's gonna be getting more traffic than it might have been designed for in the first place. Did any of that discussion come up with Victory Center?
I was not involved in any of the discussions with Victory Center once Phillip Road was taken out of the equation.
And is there a cross-access easement required for that?
The cross-access easement's already there. is
It's
my
already there.
understanding. Correct. That was what made this a viable option, is that the village already had that access easement in place.
And but that is their property, Victory's property, correct?
It's their property with the cross-access easement, which allows the village to use that for this purpose if they want to.
Okay. The stormwater storage, where is that located on their lot?
It's underneath the parking deck,
To the other one?
just south of
It would not be under the roadway.
the stormwater detention.
If you,
Is not under the roadway, that's correct. It's under the parking deck.
if you see this aerial that's in front of you where the pointer is right now, that, this portion of the parking lot, which is lighter than the asphalt beside it, that's actually the stormwater vault. So you can see the vault is outside the limits of the drive and totally within the parking area.
How many vehicles would you say are gonna go through that on a day?
In a day? Ooh, so, we mentioned the 37 just at pickup, but then you'd have the incidentals throughout the day.
Plus all the buses?
And then the buses, 6 buses to start with, we believe, and then, the afternoon as well. And perhaps a bit more that first week, and then it would taper off. Part of the strategy would be communication, training our parents, coaching them, informing them of protocols, influencing as many students as we can to take the bus to minimize the overall impact. Maybe 100 per day.
And one of the things that was briefly mentioned, but the after-school program, I think there's 50 students that will be taken out of that afternoon queue that'll stay at the Sullivan Center instead of getting picked up by their parents for, the after-school function.
If a parent kind of muffs the overall circulation or wants to short-circuit it and decides to go in through where the buses go in, and they drop their student off at the entrance to the kindergarten building where the buses drop off children, will that child coming from a car be able to enter the building in the same way as a student from a bus?
We would discourage that to begin with, kind of like our current configuration at Elementary South. So that back lot where the buses queue is how we would envision this, where we wouldn't allow that typically. But if the incidental car did come through, that student would probably make their way to the front door, which is the east side of the building.
So that student would, wait a second, whoa. That student would need to walk around the east end of the building and then enter into the front?
So procedurally, as Abe mentioned before, when the buses come through, those gates will be in action. So the likelihood that you have a car actually coming through when buses are dropping off or picking up, it's probably not very likely at all. There is entering on the north side that's actually, will be used for those students being dropped off by bus. In the event you have someone that drops their child off because you can't control every scenario or situation, even on the street, and has them walk towards the building, there's entry to be able to receive a child on the north side of the building.
Okay, that was my question.
Yes.
So all the kids from buses are dropped in that center portion?
There is a drop-off curb alongside the north side of the building that allows for buses to drop off there.
Okay, where do the kids walk when they get off the bus?
There would be a staging area on the north side of the building, and there's entry on the north side of the building.
Near that cross.
The previous, when you guys were here previously, they talked about the kids would walk east, then south, and then enter between the Sullivan Center and the kindergarten. Is that not the case anymore?
With this added entry on the north and the stairs on either side, there's full capability for them to access the building at multiple points.
Okay, I know the capability, but
Is that
wait,
your design?
yeah.
Is that how,
Pardon?
is that your intention, to enter, have them enter on the north side?
For bus purposes, for bus purposes. For drop-off purposes, the main entry is used here. The intent is for students to come in and queue in this main commons area. And I can show a plan. Oh, there we go. So you have access to the north, which is egress, not meant to enter the building, but really here from the north side that could come into the commons room and the students here being dropped off.
You know, all of our,
Right, enter on the north side, goes through the purple area to the multipurpose room?
Yes,
that what you're
they're
saying?
all intended to be escorted by staff.
Through the studio.
Correct.
because all of our elementary schools have one point of entry off the buses for the kids to go in through. They don't really go in through the stairs, they go in through a designated door.
Yeah, and that door on the north would be a door that they could procedurally come through.
Back to the plan. How do I go down or up?
Go left.
Back on the, where do staff and teachers park? If all this parking that you're showing on here is actually for the library and their expansion, where are the staff and teachers parking for this building?
All right, there's an agreement with the Sullivan Center for 45 shared parking spaces, which would be on the south side over here. Then with the library expansion, there were an additional 22 spaces, which this parking lot expansion, which came in here, it's a little less total because it.
Right, but we just heard that those parking spaces were for the library, the 7,500 square foot addition for the library.
There is an agreement, there's an intergovernmental agreement that they will be able to use these spaces in the morning, my understanding.
Yeah, based upon the design data, they would require only half of that, and we would use the other half. We have an agreement to share that cost of that lot.
But that they didn't bring that up.
Okay, I can
They
call
said
them
that
back.
they were-
I'm gonna call.
They said those spaces were for the library.
Partially true,
No, they said the spaces were for the library.
holistically.
Okay.
So basically, we have a requirement of 76 spaces. 45 will be shared with provided by the Park District. There are 9 which are provided here. That number's a little bit different than you might see on the site plan. That data didn't get updated. And then there's the 22 on the expansion portion, which pushes us right to the 76 spaces.
But I don't think you're answering the question. The question I believe that's being asked is not where do you have shared parking agreements for, not where do you have what you've already described, not as staff parking, but as parents having business at the school. Where is the staff parking?
Typically, if you follow the cursor, where's the cursor?
There you go.
Oh, there we go. So typically in this lot here is where we envision our staff parking.
Along that front line. So it won't be along this front line here. This is going to be reserved for Sullivan Center patrons, so they would have to either utilize this back area, Or-
Along the east, down,
pardon?
or along the east, down at the bottom.
Oh, yes, or along here, because they would typically not be impacted by the queuing. And then any overflow would have to go down further away?
Originally, when the exit was, or the entrance was Phillips and the exits, this east was reserved for the school district. The queuing wouldn't have been there. So that would have answered your question 6 months ago.
So what about now?
That parking is still available. The queuing does not. As you see, the double stops at this point, so this entire row of parking is still available for staff.
What is your hours of attendance for the students as it relates to your hours of attendance under your teacher's contract? Are you going to have conflicts with teachers trying to park while there's all this stacking? Because in most schools, they're pretty close when you look at the hours that they have to be in class.
Typically, it's about 30 minutes where staff show up prior to students showing up. That's typical, and we would try and maintain that same model, especially in light of the logistics involved with parking and queuing.
Okay, all right. All right, what else about this would you like to speak about this evening?
But the interior especially as well.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Before you get there, could you tell me how many staff people would be employed at the facility? Teachers and other
About
support
50,
staff?
wasn't it?
I believe it was 50.
Or in other words, how many parking spaces do you need?
70 employees?
70?
Our staff report says 70 employees.
70, yeah. 70. Yeah.
But you only have 55 spaces at the Sullivan Center, and then you're using,
2 at the library.
and 22 at the library.
We have 16 classrooms in there, so 16 plus principal, a few support staff, wouldn't be more than 30 people out there for staff. That is the outside on anything.
So 70 being kind of like a max capacity that we would foresee.
That would assume if parents were coming in into every classroom and 2 of them in a classroom, because it's only 16 classrooms in there to help out. And that to all at the same time.
Okay.
Because we won't foresee, because it's specifically a kindergarten building, and that's one of the reasons also for cost measures and stuff. We don't anticipate too much support staff and stuff to be there. The food is also not on site, it's coming from middle south. That's the food drop-off, so it's not a hot food, so the lunches is also coming in. So there's no staff, so a couple of custodians and stuff, so 30 would be on the outside limit. That's what we,
Okay, so our staff report is either correct or to be corrected. Our staff report suggests that the addition is 18 classrooms, 1 multipurpose room, and 1 administrative suite. We've now heard it's 16 classrooms. Is that the actual count?
It's 16 general classrooms with a studio and dramatic play above.
Okay. And our staff report indicates that the new facility will be able to accommodate a student population of up to 500. Is that correct?
It's currently designed for 450, I think that's what the special use permit says.
It was represented
With
in
the staff-
documentation that was
with staff,
submitted,
but-
that it could accommodate 500, but you anticipate 425 or something along those lines.
340 to 425 over the next 10 years.
Correct. We're currently at 302, though, well under that capacity.
Okay, but what I don't understand is, even if you use the higher number of 18 classrooms with what we've seen, a maximum of 22, that's 396 students that can be accommodated. How do we get up to these higher numbers? Or is our staff report just an error?
Well, the makerspace could also theoretically be used as a classroom, so it's modern layout of the typical modern school logistics. A lot of flexibility, a lot of moving walls, but if necessary, the makerspaces could be converted into a teachable classroom space.
Okay. Okay, all right.
Could that student population be not just during the day, maybe after school?
What is the question?
The student population, when you're talking about a student population of 500 students. Are they all there during the day, or are they also there at other times of the day?
Well, that population is max for this particular facility down the road. So that's not what you're going to see on day one, and I think that's what Abe was trying to clarify with the student count currently, As Abe mentioned, if you were to, we looked at different scenarios with the district to show how they could accommodate students up to that capacity. And it would include creating general classrooms out of those maker spaces and the studio in the room above. So effectively, you would add 2, 4, 6 classrooms to the 16 general classrooms for 22 if you had to get to that max.
Right, you want to talk about the interior, I believe?
Sure. So this, well, I was just going to provide an overview to the interior of the building, give a little bit of general information. Initially, these classroom areas, there were 4 on a single story. They were, the design was approached as kind of a petal design, if you will, where each petal was a different kindergarten community with shared classrooms that could be opened to small group and shared maker space and kind of more STEM or STEAM activity space within it. Small group pullouts, toilet facilities for all of the rooms. So they're very similar. They mirror across this line, and then they stack on a second story above. The interior would be studio and art or dramatic play and OTPT, and then shared multi-purpose. Where you see in the red here is the Illinois State Board of Education and ICC 500 required storm shelter that is required by code for new school facilities or major additions. So this storm shelter is a reinforced precast concrete structure that will be able to accommodate the building occupants in the event of a storm situation. So that kind of gives you the commons area or multi-purpose area is a 2-story space. This is just kind of a zoomed out look to show where it would connect down to the gym in the Park District. And then the infilled area, which is fenced and protected, provides outdoor play for the students of the building. Roof plan kind of showed where equipment layout is. So this elevation here, you would have to slice the Sullivan Center and take it away, because this is, if you were looking directly from the Sullivan Center, this is the straight-on south elevation that you would see. So you see the precast structure here, and you'll see more of that in the 3D shots. In the north shot from the library, you would see a portion of that precast structure here, the Sullivan Center, and then the addition to the classroom, or the building with the classroom wing. I'll explain more of the materiality as we get there. Just to kind of orient yourselves, the east elevation, the main entry coming in here, the administrative wing, and then the classroom addition. And then alternately on the west elevation, the classroom addition here, the Sullivan Center with the precast form in the middle. So this kind of gives you a sense of coming into the building, what you would see, trying to not only utilize features from the existing Sullivan Center and the library, but also create new forms to denote that this is the entry, as well as pull in new materials and new colors in the similar palette with composite metal paneling on the north side, wrapping the stairwells in paneling, utilizing utility brick and split face and materials in general as most economically feasible, but still trying to bring some unique characteristics and denote this as the kindergarten facility separate from the Park District and the library facility. And signage really, once the school district has a name for the kindergarten center, it would just be pin-mounted building signage, no site signage intended for it. And that's what this page shows, but you can't see the line work on this screen. I don't know if you can on yours, but your packet will have that. So I'll just back up. If anybody has any questions, just.
Okay. Any questions, anyone?
I'm glad to see that the plan layout of the spaces, the classrooms, is actually more segregated into, it used to be more open. And I've been reading a lot of studies on open kindergarten plans and how when it's too open, there's too many distractions. So this feels a little better to me that you do have a way to partition it.
Right, yeah, the district wanted to be able to have multiple options, to be able to vary the use in the space, but also to be able to close off an open space to suit different modalities and a variety of uses.
Okay, anybody else?
I'm going to go back to the exit again. So, was there any special construction, I guess this is a staff question, because they're not coming on the drive that they're planning on using? Or is this just a parking lot driveway that they're going to be using?
Typically, and I need to verify this, but I can tell you typically what the village engineer looks for is that the main drive aisles be designed to roadway specifications. I can verify that and have that in my report.
That's 100% correct.
Yeah, thank you. So, and I have no reason to believe why that wouldn't have been applied to the Victory Center at the time that it was built. I can verify that in all certainty moving forward, but I'm fairly certain right now that it is designed to roadway specifications.
And who pays for the repair of that Victory Center?
Well, there's an ingress egress easement that goes through the property, and, you know, I mean, if the user, you know, it's hard to answer that question because it would be something that wouldn't be regulated through village ordinances as such. They would have to, in my mind, they'd have to work through a solution. If it's a wear and tear issue, they'd have to work through a solution, the two parties, the school district and Victory Center. If it was a damage issue, obviously there's other avenues they'd have to go through. But the village wouldn't apply particular regulations or get involved with responsibilities in those matters.
It would have to be an agreement. I mean, any sound person would have to say that there would have to be an agreement between the parties to share, you know. But the benefit, what's the benefit to Victory Center? There's no benefit.
No.
Victory
none.
Center. So, you know, Victory Center would want to impose those costs onto the group that generated that damage.
Have you had those conversations?
As far as I know, those conversations have not taken place between the two parties yet.
Yeah, but wouldn't the party be the Park District? Because the Park District is the owner. And typically under Illinois, it's what's called servient and dominant tenements. And I think, does the Park District, has it had that discussion?
We have not had that specific discussion.
Okay. Since you're there, don't leave.
Okay.
My question is when I look at this, and I look at the 18.3 statements that were made, number one, the 18.3 statements that were made in our packet, I find lacking. And all they do is they simply repeat what the ordinance says without any articulation as to why or how. So for purposes of that, you know, unless the other members of the commission feel differently, I don't believe that the 18.3 statements are responsive at all, and I think they would need to be substantially amended and resubmitted to the village before it's considered. But my question really is, for you from the Park District's perspective, is I understand the benefit here to the school district. I don't understand the benefit to the Park District. And since you're the landowner, and you're essentially asking for special use on a PUD that was for you, what's the benefit?
For the kindergarten, I think the Park District would like to work with the school district on getting a kindergarten built to ease some of the space issues.
So
And
the
then
benefit
from
is being a good corporate citizen? It's just being nice?
Well, no, there's another benefit. We do operate their after-school program, and having the kindergartners there has been something in surveys that a lot of parents do have concerns about first, fifth, sixth graders in the same room. So in this situation, our staff literally have to go next door, and kindergartners don't have to leave, 50, 60 of them, maybe more so. That is one benefit to the Park District, is that we do operate the before and after school care.
for the school district.
How do you, as the Park District, reconcile the difference between your jurisdictional boundaries and District 76's jurisdictional boundaries as not being coterminous? You go over many other school districts that 73 does not. So how is it a benefit to your, if you will, constituents?
To our Park District patrons?
Yeah. Let me make it real personal.
Okay.
I live in Vernon Hills, I'm part of the Vernon Hills Park District. My entire neighborhood does not go to District 73. We go to District 76. So how is this a public benefit for the Park District since you're asking for the special use?
We're asking a special use on behalf of the school district, but yes, we are the landowners. And I think that early on, we agreed to move the gym over so that we can use the space together, as a second gym was needed on some of our surveys. But during the day, it's not used, so the kindergarten does have use for it. We did put in a divider to divide and secure our wing, if you will. But to the constituents that don't live in District 73, I don't have an answer. That is a very good point.
Okay,
Yes, I can
fair
bring
enough.
that back.
Okay. As we asked earlier, the library district, the gym is already built.
Yes,
Okay. And that was built by the Park District, I understand.
yes.
Okay. Was it contributed to by District 76 or 73?
I'd have to look into that. I do not believe they did. I think we, had an agreement.
Well, someone behind you is shaking their head no, so.
It was,
Okay, then,
I was 90% sure, but I was.
fair enough.
Okay.
Fair enough. This building, how is this being, who's paying for this?
The school district? That is school districts. They are paying for the building.
Okay.
I believe, and I'm not, I believe it's through the recent referendum.
Okay, fair enough. Is it through a tenancy? In other words, are you granting them, like, as a landlord, a lease to this?
I do
property?
believe there is an intergovernment agreement for a lease. I'm not sure how many years it is, and I think it is very minimal cost. I'm not sure on the amount per year.
Okay, from the Park District's perspective, since you're the landowner and the Sullivan Center is an existing facility with existing programming, okay, putting aside, because I know you're going to say this, but we'll pretend you didn't for a second, there'll be perfect coordination, you'll never have overlap, and no one will ever have it. How are you guaranteeing that your programming is not being adversely affected by, A, the stacking that's going to go way past, as we heard, that island, B, the parking issues, which is going to be really kind of by your building, so to speak, and C, usage at other times of, your lots, et cetera?
So if I may start from your last question
Sure.
first. We have looked at the parking lots. The mornings, we have very little concerns about, but the afternoons, well, let me phrase it. The original plan, going out to Phillip, did not adversely affect the Park District in almost no way, except that we did have this entrance here, which we requested to be gated off at all times except for our use or emergency purposes. So when that was squashed, let's just say, by Victory Center meetings, this plan was brought to our attention. Let's see if I can get to it. The biggest concern was affecting our staff parking and our program's ability to maneuver in the parking lot. So yes, to your question, we have expressed our concerns, staff have, and the board, the Park District Board has. I would say that possibly most of them would vote no if this were a voting matter. The biggest concern we have with the stacking is, it's not the stacking as much as the location of the stacking itself. We've worked with Don Dixon on removing some of these triangle islands here and here. We have strongly suggested, and I'm not going to use the word demanded, but that this skate park be moved into this grassy area here so that the stacking can be moved as far away as from the building as possible, so that patrons and staff are not interrupted by the twice-a-day stacking of what could be somewhere between 40 to 80 cars.
Under the village code ordinances, under 18.34, without any explanation, the question is, are there adequate service, utilities, access roads, drainage, other necessary facilities? Under 18.35, have adequate measures been taken or will be taken to provide ingress and egress designed to minimize traffic congestion? It says in the public streets, but here I think a fair reading is, because this is a public facility, that should also be in your public facility. So based upon the comments we just heard and the provisions in the village code, this, I guess, proposed vehicle stacking plan we're looking at, does it need to be this way, or can it be, as we just heard, quote unquote, move to the, what is that, I guess, the east and the south, I guess? That's
Could
really
it
not,
move?
that's
Yeah.
really, well, you can do anything, but you're not doing it, so I guess it's really the school district would have to answer that.
We have looked at some costs. The biggest cost is this moving the skate park. It's $300,000, and that's not new equipment. This site, there's a lot of excavation to be done here. They need 6 inches of concrete, so that's 15 inches down on top of what's already 4 feet high. And that includes, unfortunately, the skate park manufacturer. They are the only ones that can remove and install, and they're out of California. So in 2006, that was $89,000.
Okay.
So I can't even imagine with inflation how much that would cost.
Okay.
Another thing we suggested was to, even with the staff, the first couple of days, is to stripe or absolutely paint their queue line, so visually,
Oh, okay.
parents, okay, I have to be in this blue, white, whatever color you want to choose.
Has that been addressed or considered, if that's the right word, as a proposed vehicle stacking alternative?
Oh, absolutely. It's just paint. I mean, if this is the queuing that, on day one, we would put probably some blue paint down there to delineate the two, the merging point, and where we're going to have 2 lines of cars back to back. It's just not shown on this plan, but there's no objection to adding pavement marking to help delineate that.
Is the reality of the lot, because I've never tried to drive two abreast down these drive lanes with cars there. If there are cars parked there, can you really get two abreast? And I'm not talking about if we measure it and we get, an inch clearance by a car. Is it a practical use of space? Or is it really is it too tight to start having stacking like that?
If you had cars parked on both sides, personally, I don't think it's a really good idea. I don't know if it's practical.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough.
From the standpoint of the aisles being the village aisles being wide enough for two-way traffic. And there's the other point to take into consideration is the aquatic center lot is pretty well vacant.
Yes, it's wide open during the school year.
Sure.
So
It's more seasonal in nature.
Yes.
if it does become an issue, then the issue would be for this area right here where you're double parked. Double stacked along this U. That should not be a concern whatsoever.
Okay. To make at least a partial record, though I think you do have to submit something in addition to the village, 18.3.1 says the establishment, maintenance, and operation of the special use will not be detrimental to or endanger public health, safety, morals, or general welfare. I don't think we have to really as much about morals in this case, but I'm more concerned about the question of safety and general welfare. How do you respond to that it will not, in terms of the issues with the access, the issues with the ingress and egress, going out through Victory Center, et cetera?
The question you're posing is this an unsafe condition that we're?
No, I'm not posing that. I'm posing that under the village code, a special use has to meet certain specific criteria. And one of the criteria is what I just read in 18.3.1, which is referenced in your memo or not yours, but DLR's memo of April 27, 2018. And it doesn't really say how, it just repeats the village code statement. So I want to know is how, are these things, met?
All right, I'd like to, if I'm going to answer that, I'd like to see
That's
the
fair.
verbiage again. I don't have the verbiage in front of me.
That-
Here you go.
Certainly fair.
So 18.3.1,
One.
establishes maintenance will not be detrimental to or endangered public health, safety.
So just to be clear, in the memo, all that is repeated is what's in the,
This is
okay, so
pretty
there-
much,
it does not answer how it's. okay.
yes, this pretty much just says,
So we will,
right,
okay.
yeah, this is pretty much what the ordinance says, that it has to meet as a criteria or a factor, but it's just been repeated or parroted
Instead of
back.
telling us
Right.
how,
All
okay.
right, well,
Does it ask
I
to
guess
explain
just
that?
off the cuff, with the circulation and whatnot, we're not proposing to put any more traffic than is designed for based on two-way operation of the drive aisles, based upon the two-way public operation of the atrium drive where we're exiting, and we're also reducing the traffic that would be introduced to Aspen Drive.
But I think you're conflating various things. Are you suggesting that this plan with this ingress and egress and access and putting this special use here does not have any detrimental impact on the usage of the adjoining properties?
If I may clarify, the way I interpret this statement is the health, safety, and welfare of the occupants. So the parking and staging and the procedural way that the district plans to address it, plus having separate bus access and car traffic and drop-off from pedestrian, I think, maybe Don, you would agree that this site does achieve that. Whether there's exiting onto adjacent property through an already established easement, that's not health, life, safety, welfare related in that statement.
I appreciate your comments. I would respectfully disagree. I think you're reading it far too narrowly. So if we go to 18.3.2, the question there is a little bit more specific, is not injurious to the use and enjoyment of other properties in the immediate vicinity. So here is, can you state that what you're doing here does not have an injurious use or does not impact negatively the enjoyment or use of other properties, which here I think would be more specifically probably the Sullivan Center, number one, and number two, Victory Center.
Does this have the potential to impact the operations of the Sullivan Center?
Mhm.
Yes, it does, based upon what we've discussed here. As Mr. Kim said, the Park District Board would prefer to see the skate park.
You may want to move the microphone over a little bit or stand in front of
The
it.
Park District Board would prefer to see the skate park moved. Based upon the stakeholder meeting, it was agreed to see if the operations under this scenario would impact them adversely, and if it did, I believe at that point in time, the school board would be required to relocate the skate park into the green area. Does it have the potential to impact the operations of the Victory Center on the south side? More traffic, one could always argue that more traffic is going to impact their operations.
Okay.
Does it impact them during a time where they are operating with cars coming in and out of there? Only a traffic study's going
Okay.
to tell us that.
18.3.4 relates to being a demonstration of adequate service utilities, which I'm assuming there are because we haven't heard anything contrary from staff. I'm going to skip over the next one. Drainage, we've also heard that there is sufficient drainage, but the middle one is access roads. Are there adequate access roads in that you're not accessing directly off the public way, rather you're accessing through an adjoining, for lack of a better way to put it, parking lot?
Well, I would have to say that I think the only one that's being called into question is the one on the south side of Victory Center where there is an existing cross-access easement in place. So looking at the cross-access easement, I think you'd have to go back and look at the language and intent that the village had when they entered into the cross-access easement as to what that could be used for.
I haven't read that, but I'll rely upon you or anyone who can tell me. Does that cross-access easement contemplate a more intensive use on the property such as been described, with up to 100, I think was the testimony, cars and buses, or it was in its, quote-unquote, prior condition?
I would have to
Fair enough.
relegate that question back to the village engineer who
Certainly fair.
studied that agreement.
Okay. 18.3.5 says adequate measures have been taken or will be taken to provide ingress and egress designed to minimize traffic congestion in the public streets. I believe the testimony that I've heard this evening is that this was, quote-unquote, designed to minimize traffic congestion on Aspen. Okay. But since we are now pushing it off of Aspen, either through Victory Center and then onto Atrium, have we met this ingress and egress objective?
So as I understand it, the question would be, is the ingress and egress to Atrium Drive being impacted by this influx of traffic? It's a standard village street. My traffic engineer is here. She can attest to the volumes that a standard city street's designed to accommodate. This is not excessive in my opinion, but Lynn might be better to answer that question.
Sure.
Hi, good evening. Related to the adjacent streets, to Atrium Drive, to Deer Path, the traffic volumes that we're really speaking about here are for a very short duration. We're really looking at, as we had talked earlier, the staff parking, essentially the traffic coming in and out of the staff will continue to use Aspen Drive. It's really just the egress traffic during those 2 short durations of times that are going to be added. So relatively speaking, looking at our previous traffic estimations when we looked at a planning study that we prepared, a traffic detailed analysis back in 2016 that took in consideration the Sullivan Center expansion. It took in consideration growth of all of the school districts. It assumed a maximum capacity of 525 students for this kindergarten center, as well as an expansion for the library. And from that study, we realized that there needed to be, and predominantly as you described earlier in some of your concerns, that a lot of the congestion is related to predominantly the egress getting to Town Line. A lot of the backups that are created are essentially because of the traffic light there. You have Town Line Road, which is a state-maintained roadway that has multiple signals along it where you want to maintain progression along it. IDOT maintains it, and so by the limitations, you have a limited amount of green time that gets appropriated to it no matter what. So part of the looking at various alternatives was to, the main focus was to get some of that egress traffic off. Deer Path Road has capacity during those timeframes, the school peak timeframes for this time period, to accommodate that additional traffic. Looking at the distributions that we do see at the schools and looking at the schools and where the school district boundaries are, we would expect predominantly most of that traffic to be going to Town Line. Maybe 20% of it will go back to the neighborhood, but something to realize, that traffic is already on Aspen going to kindergarten centers, going back to that neighborhood. So traffic circulating within the residential streets isn't new traffic to there per se for the kindergarten center. So some of them, this may actually be more convenient for some of those residents that are located closer to Deer Path that had to circulate back through those residents. So it may, for some of them, this may be a better option. The school timings, the placing of them, I know there's one school that will start, I believe that's later than the kindergarten center. The timings of the school have been optimized, and actually in our planning study, we took the traffic loads and distributed them over like 15-minute intervals to see when is the best time to start. And we got from the school district today, we learned when their ideal start time is right in lines to where we looked at when those studies were. So the middle school that's directly across the street, those start times will not conflict. So those are going to come and go before the start times will. Getting back to the question in hand, the additional traffic that's generated by, that will be on here added to the adjacent roadways, it can be accommodated within, it does have that ample capacity to accommodate the additional school traffic as well.
I'm confused now. Based on what you just testified, that it will not conflict with the start times and the times for traffic of the schools which are to the west, why then not put it back out on Aspen? You're not talking about a multiple, you're
It's,
talking about a different
it's
time.
still that added, there's still that additional traffic for that. It's mainly, in all honesty, it's mainly the PM egress. You still will have students that will come in, you will still have some, but the main start times are the optimal times. You could have it there onto Aspen, but this actually provides a mechanism we believe that will help to minimize and disperse and provide good separation.
And you believe that that counterbalances the fact that that egress is through effectively a parking lot?
It's a very short distance. It is the rear side of, I'm sorry, for the Victory Center or for, yeah.
For
So
Victory Center.
exiting out the Victory Center, it's essentially their back parking lot. Most of their main activity occurs through the predominantly through the north, through the main entrance. This is the rear side of the lot where you do have some residents, but it is a senior center. You have partially of it that are, from what I understanding, independent living, but the other side has very limited car traffic as far as residential activity. So you don't have significant volumes of traffic that are coming in and out of that rear lot during those mainly just 2 time frames. It will be gated off during the rest of the day, so it's really just essentially a 20-minute window in the morning and a 20-minute window in the afternoon that will be used.
And your professional opinion is that it is the preferable manner to exit traffic through a parking lot from an adjoining use such as a school?
Versus,
Public way?
there's an easement there which would permit this additional traffic that
Different
it can
question.
accommodate it.
That's a different question.
In an ideal world, if there was unlimited funds and you can create a new bridge that would not have to go through a parking lot, yes.
Okay.
But in looking at the constraints that we have here, and putting the school in another location, I think takes away some of the convenience that you have here that you create by this campus. By those essence that you have the multiple parents that have students in various locations, they want to get to these, sometimes to these different schools and interact between them. So you have a campus here, and everybody within the community knows during the time frames, and it's a very short duration of time associated with the school traffic that you experience that congestion.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I have one question. The kindergarten building, when is school typically over?
During the day, or are you talking about
During
calendar
During the
year?
day,
Calendar
for kindergarten.
day.
So not yet finalized, but we're looking at school ending at possibly 2:35 p.m.
Okay, 2:30. While you're there, could you grab my,
Yes, you wanted this back?
thanks. So after 2:30, what are other potential uses for the kindergarten building?
Well, we have a waiting list for our after-school program, so I think that would be, first and foremost, I think that's what it would be used for primarily. Our facilities are rented by the Park District. All our facilities are rented. So, that would also be afforded to the Park District to be able to rent some of these spaces for that. Don't know if we mentioned that there is a new playground in this triangular open area, which would also be shared by both entities.
Okay, an after-school program for whom?
With the little
Park
ones that
District-
can.
The Park District will be running it for kindergartners.
Okay, for kindergartners.
Yes, kindergartners
Um,
that are currently there.
Any other groups outside the village? Any special needs groups or any other types of groups that may want to utilize the facilities?
No, it would be just the Park District, unless there's agreement for a third party that would like to use it on Saturday and Sundays, but that has never been brought up. The SRA did want to put something in there, that was the last plan, but I do believe they moved to Mundaline or somewhere else. They found a space to put their sensory room. So that was in the plans 9 months ago or 12 months ago.
Okay, but it's no longer.
No, that is no longer. That is the art room, or the music room. We're in
Yeah,
the
so
front, on the
that,
north end.
yeah, that was previously planned on the north end here as a separate sensory room that was going to be accessed and controlled differently, but that's no longer the case.
Great, any other questions?
I just had a statement about the architecture. So your north facade is very nice. There's the metal panels, the multicolored glass. It's unfortunate that it's on the north side because the only time it's going to get sun and appreciate how that might look is a few weeks in the summer when no one's in the building. And I think that you've done a good job as an architect with the building, but you were given a lousy site.
Part and parcel, actually orientation for the building, having it face the short side east-west, it actually garners the opportunity to get natural daylight, albeit it is the north side. These are expansive windows. These are almost floor-to-ceiling windows for these classrooms. So they are getting a lot of natural daylight. North side, so reduces glare, reduces heat gain on the building. There is also visual interest to be able to drive by on the north side and from the
But only buses can drive by on the north side.
immediately adjacent to it, but you're not going to not see the building driving by on Town Line. I think that was also a point brought up from the library, is that you're going to see it from different directions.
Not going to see the library building. Nobody's even going to notice it happened.
So, the most exposure we have, we did what we could with the
I know,
facade.
and I appreciate that. I wish you had been given a better site where you could express that architecture better with natural lighting, and you're just reacting to what you're given.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, at least they have like different elevations. I mean, there's some architecture here. Yeah, it's fun.
okay.
Thank
This is a public hearing, and to the extent that we've now gone quite some time with the applicant itself, if anyone from the public wishes to comment with respect to this request for special use as well as for the site landscaping and elevations, this would be the opportunity to do so. Anyone? Okay, seeing no one, we're going to then close the public comment section of this meeting. Is there anything you'd like to do in terms of summation or any additional comments? I was impressed. That was
Sorry.
very theatrical. Anything? Okay.
Have they really even addressed
Well, that's
first
a,
article? I mean, the first item?
that's a good point. You've talked really about this, this addition, et cetera. What Commissioner Heidner is speaking of, the first motion that is being asked for is to amend the Code of Ordinances to provide that public schools, elementary and high, and private schools having the same curriculum as ordinarily given in public schools, provided that no rooms shall be used for housing or sleeping purposes, be added to the list of special uses in the Conservation and Open Space District. Do you want to speak to that at all?
So you're asking if the special use is for the open space, which is Park District property?
No, we're really asking, should we amend our ordinance?
Oh, should you amend
to
your
even
ordinance?
permit this type of, as a special use?
As the petitioner, yes, I would like to amend.
Okay. Does this have any wider application than this particular site?
There is a wetland. It's only retains water. I would say there's more human beings and wildlife inside there. And other than that, it's just overgrown buckthorn and invasive plants.
Would this impact, Mike, any other COS zoning in the village for schools?
No, this is the only area in the village that's zoned COS 1.
Right. So those
What are,
softball questions.
what's the zoning on the other schools' buildings?
PIB.
PIB.
That's what we ran into. I mean, the amendment's part of the request because staff recognized it needed to be part of their request. So.
I had a question about sleeping purposes. I'm just not familiar. Do the kids take naps? Is that considered sleeping? The kindergartners?
It's less than an hour, it's just a nap.
Okay, but
Yeah.
Do you nap at your desk?
Sleep, it's
I
not-
think
there's
really-
no designated sleeping rooms as if
Okay.
you would find in a dormitory or anything like
It,
that.
it may be the difference between preschool and kindergarten.
Yeah.
And so where the Park District has a preschool where there is some of that activity going on, they want to make sure that this isn't also going to be a preschool. I don't know.
But the preschool is in a COS district.
The preschool is only 4 hours. There's no, we do not have all-day
It's already there,
preschool.
though. It's already accepted. This is in addition to.
Okay. Does anyone from the public have any comments they want to make with respect to the amendment of the zoning ordinance to provide in the Conservation Open Space District as a special use, as we've described, schools? Okay. Hearing none, any other discussion by the commission with respect to this text amendment, which is number 1?
Well, I don't consider a school an open space
Okay.
use.
Why wouldn't we change the zoning? Why wouldn't we, instead of doing the amendment?
Well, without the amendment, there's no mechanism in the zoning code that would give the Planning and Zoning Commission the authority to recommend and the village board the authority to approve the school in that district, so.
You'd have to make it PIB
Well,
first.
yeah, what she's saying is why
Why
wouldn't
not
you
make it
rezone it to
PIB?
BIB?
Oh, you could certainly do that, but by just amending, by keeping it COS 1 and providing the amendment that schools could be allowed as a special use, you're only amending the use section of the COS 1 district. All the requirements that encourage maintenance of open space will still apply to this property. We would lose all those protections of open space if we were to change the zoning to PIB.
What if it's just considered a special use and within the COS?
That's what it is.
This is.
That's what it is.
Any other questions? Okay. Then we have a motion to recommend, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, what were
I thought he was going to say
Oh,
something.
I'm sorry.
You said maintenance on the open space, despite if this is amended, it's going to be a special use for a school?
COS 1 district encourages maintaining open space on properties within that zone district. And that applies to the property right now and will continue to apply to the property. The only thing that's different is the use section within that district, which would now include schools as a special use. So no other rules that you're currently having to follow on that property would change.
Okay. So we have a motion to recommend approval to amend Article 14B, Section 14B3 of Appendix C of the Code of Ordinances by adding, quote, "Public schools, elementary and high, and private schools having the same curriculum as ordinarily given in public schools, provided that no room shall be used for housing or sleeping purposes, to the list of special uses permitted in the COS 1 Conservation Open Space District." We need a second for that.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, we need a roll call.
Commissioner Heidner,
No.
Commissioner Mulcrone,
no.
Commissioner Cotton,
No.
Commissioner Hesner,
Yes.
Chairman Morris.
Yes. Okay. Next, we have a motion to recommend approval to amend the special use permit, subject to the conditions contained within the staff report for the following. And we'll do this as two. A, to amend the special use permit for a planned unit development to allow an addition to the existing Vernon Hills Park District Recreational Center, commonly referred to as the Sullivan Community Center. and two, or B, to allow expansion of a parking lot and related improvements. We need a second.
Do you want to split that?
Do we, or it's kind of all one and the same, isn't it?
I don't know.
You want to split?
I don't know. I'm throwing it out there. I mean, what have we had the most trouble with? I mean, there's different things, isn't there? There's
Fair enough.
expansion of a parking lot and related improvements, which I am interpreting as drives and access points and things of that nature involving the site. And the first one is to,
Allow an addition.
yeah, is the structure.
So we're being asked to approve the building of a structure on their existing PUD.
Yeah, I broke up the site plan into two sections. One is for the new footprint of the building, and the other one is for the expansion of the parking facility and drive aisles.
Okay, so let's do it as two then. Okay, so it'll just be a motion to recommend approval to amend the special use permit, to amend it to allow the addition to the existing Vernon Hills Park District Recreational Center, commonly referred to as the Sullivan Center, and the addition we're referring to is the proposed kindergarten center for District 73. Okay, so we need a second for that.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? I don't know if this is discussion, this is my comment. I would encourage the petitioner, and I'm not sure here who that really is for this, what I'm going to say, whether it's the Park District, whether it's the school district, or whether it's probably more appropriately DLR Architects, to resubmit in appropriate form responses to the 18.3 factors with an explanation, not a mere recitation of what the ordinance says. Because right now, I don't believe it meets the ordinance's requirements. Okay, anybody else?
Is there any recommendations on how to abide by those ordinances?
Actually, a really good one was the library district before you in their submission gave us what the ordinance factor was and then had a paragraph below it describing how it was met in their case. So that would be a pretty good model, I think, unless Mike has other ones.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example. I could provide some other ones. Basically, you just need to answer the questions.
Right.
And if the question is no, answer is no,
Oh,
back to the drawing board?
But it's not a yes or no question. It's just responding to a series of elements.
Right.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion? Okay, new roll call.
Commissioner Heidner?
No.
Commissioner Mulcrone?
No.
Commissioner Cotton?
No,
Commissioner Hesner?
Yes.
Chairman Morris?
No, and let me explain why I'm voting no. I believe it's a very attractive building. I believe it is also a very good use of space and a very thoughtful use of space for a school. I'm really voting no based upon the fact that I do not believe that the 18.3 ordinance factors were adequately described this evening or in an adequate fashion. So I really have no complaint about what is proposed. I really have a complaint about really how it was presented. Okay. Second, we have a motion to recommend approval to amend the special use permit to allow expansion of a parking lot and related improvements. We need a second for that.
second.
Any
When we're
discussion?
saying expansion of the parking lot,
To allow it to occur, not necessarily how it's occurring, but to allow it to occur.
For the purposes of a school or for the purposes of the park district?
I think they're kind of one and the same here.
It's right for both uses.
Okay.
So it's termed an expansion, right?
but when we're saying that, we're really not talking about the current parking lot, we're talking about the new driveway for the school, right?
Yeah, that's correct. There's no, the use of the existing parking lot doesn't necessitate a site change. The parking lot's already there. It's going to continue to be used. The site changes are the turnaround area, the drive aisle, and then the parking for the buses.
But this particular question, to clarify, is about allowing that, not necessarily agreeing with how it has been shown. It's just allowing it to occur.
But I think it's allowing it to occur
Well,
as presented.
It's so, oh, okay. Okay.
Isn't that what it is?
Is it,
Doesn't say that.
is it because the next question is,
Final site landscape.
yeah. Though, if we're looking upon this as overlapping,
Yeah,
then-
okay, yeah,
then it makes
expansion,
a big difference.
expansion of the parking lot is just the area of the parking lot that's being expanded, period. That's the site change. And then the next one is final,
Site landscaping.
the first one was, okay, and, excuse me, 2B is a subpart of the special use permit. The amendment to the special use permit is the expansion of the parking lot
Oh,
and the addition. That's the amendment to the special
But
use
really,
permit.
there's no expansion of the existing parking lot. It's a new parking lot somewhere else.
but it's,
Yeah, but just to clarify, it's for approval for this.
connected.
The
It's to al-
driveway.
But the thing that I'm hung up on is the words, "to allow." In a special use context, to allow means
Okay.
that's what the special use is all about.
So-
Not necessarily what the solution is, it's just allowing a solution to occur.
Yes.
That's, that,
I agree with
I'm
that.
trying to clarify this because
Okay.
it's gonna
So
have
this includes
bearing
the
on how I'm
connection
gonna-
then to the parking lot at Victory Center?
Yes, and it would include that. That's this piece right here that creates the connection.
Gotcha.
And again, we're basically, we're amending the original ordinance that created the special use permit to allow all the drive aisles to turn around and all that. That's what we're, and the addition.
But, yeah, but we separated them.
Yes.
Right. we
But this current, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was really because, in all honesty, I thought the discussion would focus so heavily on the traffic circulation that it just provides an opportunity to vote on the merits of the addition on its own, and then on the merits of the site plan changes and traffic circulation.
Okay, all right. So do we have a second for that one or not?
Cotton.
Okay, so any other discussion? Okay, we need a roll call vote?
Commissioner Hesner.
No,
Commissioner Heidner.
No.
Commissioner Mulcrone.
No.
Commissioner Cotton.
No?
Chairman Morris.
No, and I echo my prior comments with respect to the 18.3. Lastly, we have a motion to recommend approval of final site and landscape plans and building elevations for the property subject to the conditions that have been discussed.
can we separate this into two?
It probably makes sense. So we'd have a motion to recommend approval of final site and landscaping plans, subject to the conditions. We need a second for that.
Second.
Any discussion? My only comment would be similar to what I said earlier this evening, is I believe in all cases of public improvements, be it a park district, be it a village, be it a library district, or in fact here, be it a school district, there are specific concerns that are always raised regarding monetary issues and balancing. Here, once again, as I said, I think what is being sought is a very noble and good and needed idea. However, I don't feel here that the balance has been pushed across, if you will, the line because of the issues regarding site circulation, et cetera. And therefore, you know, you'll see my vote. So, anybody else? If not, we need a roll call.
Commissioner Heidner.
No.
Commissioner Mulcrone.
No.
Commissioner Cotton.
No?
Commissioner Hesner.
Nope.
Chairman Morris.
No. Okay. Next, we have a motion to recommend approval of building elevations for the property subject to the conditions discussed. We need a second for that.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
You know, I like the building, I like the architecture, it's different, it's probably be the nicest school we have in the area. I just think this is a terrible site for it, and the circulation's really bad. And so I don't know how to approve a building elevation if I wish that building was somewhere else, because then I know the building would be different. It wouldn't be this building, it would be something different.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, we need a roll call.
Commissioner Heidner.
Yes.
Commissioner Mulcrone.
No.
Commissioner Cotton.
No?
Commissioner Hesner.
Nope.
Chairman Morris.
Yes. All right. Anything else we have?
No.
You want to, village board?
This will go to the village board on February 5th on the committee of the whole agenda. So we'll see you that night.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Have a nice
good luck.
evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And thank you for board members who chose to show up tonight.
Yes.
That's
Okay.
very nice.
Next, we have no development review, it looks like. But we do have the approval of minutes of the July 11th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
Did we do that?
Yeah.
Are these the ones we did already?
Yeah, we did them last, you surprised
Okay.
me by doing it last week, so I thought I would actually have you sign it now that we.
All right, so we don't need to, we've already done that. Therefore, we have a motion to adjourn. We need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned. Good night.
Okay, well, that was quick.